Hey
suits
everyone,
you, sir.
tonight we are peeling back the starched,
Quite the
stiff layers
dashing
of the
figure you
19th
make.
century
Indeed,
to
the latest
uncover one of
fashion.
its most surprising and well-hidden secrets, the male corset. Picture the archetypal Victorian gentleman top hat, frock coat, a stern expression that suggests he's contemplating industrial progress or, more likely, his own indigestion. Now, imagine that beneath that veneer of rugged masculinity, he's laced into a whalebone and steel contraption, tighter than your average Wi-Fi agreement. It's a strange, fascinating, and deeply revealing story about vanity, status, and pain. And speaking of pain, a quick reality check if you were actually transported back to this era. Your chances of surviving the water quality alone are, let's be generous, dicey. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where you're all listening from, so please drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. And for my listeners on other platforms, a follow or a like helps the channel grow and ensures you won't miss our next journey. Now I'll then dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a thick, complicated scent, a cocktail of damp wool, horse manure, coal smoke, and something vaguely sweet, like roasting chestnuts from a street vendor's cart. Your feet find their rhythm on the uneven cobblestones, slick with a fine mist that hangs in the air, blurring the yellow glow of the gas lights that have just begun to hiss to life. This is London, not the London of today, a sprawling, modern metropolis, but a city in the very heart of the Victorian age, a place humming with a new kind of energy, a nervous, ambitious thrum. Carriages rattle past, their iron-rimmed wheels striking sparks against the stone. The coachman shouting warnings that are mostly lost in the general din. You pull the collar of your coat a little tighter, a purely reflexive gesture against the chill, and you watch the people, and they, in turn, are watching you. Everyone is watching everyone. It's the great, unspoken pastime of the city. A woman descending from a carriage has her bonnet assessed in a single, sweeping glance by a dozen passers-by. A clerk, hurrying home with a parcel, has his worn cuffs and slightly scuffed shoes noted and filed away. Appearance isn't just a matter of personal taste here. It's your resume, your character reference, and your social standing, all broadcast in the language of fabric and posture. This is a society that perfected the art of the surface, a world that threw up grand structures like the Crystal Palace for the
Oh,
Great
it suits you,
Exhibition
sir.
of 1851, a literal glass
Quite the
house to
dashing
show
figure
off
you
the
make.
wonders of its
Indeed, the
industry,
latest fashion.
all while hiding the grime and the poverty in the sprawling back streets. Your gaze drifts to the gentlemen. They move with a particular kind of confidence, a ramrod straight posture that seems to defy the natural slouch of the human body. They are the masters of this universe, the beneficiaries of an empire on which the sun never sets. You see them in their dark frock coats, the fabric impeccably tailored, their trousers creaseless, their top hats sitting at a perfect, calculated angle. They project an aura of unshakable solidity, of physical and moral rectitude. Their bodies seem to be built on an entirely different blueprint from the shuffling, stooped forms of the laborers and street sweepers who give them a wide berth. But you notice something. As one particularly striking gentleman passes under a gas lamp, the light catches the line of his torso. There's a smoothness to it, a rigid, elegant taper from his broad shoulders down to his waist that seems sculpted. It's too perfect. Men, even fit men, have a certain softness, a give to their form. This man seems to have none. His waistcoat lies perfectly flat, without the slightest hint of a wrinkle or a bulge from the shirt beneath. It's as if his torso was carved from a single block of wood. It's a living statue, gliding through the London fog. And that's when the question sparks in your mind, how does he do that? It's not diet, it's not exercise, at least not as we know it. The secret is closer, more intimate. It's a hidden architecture, a cage of cloth and bone worn against the skin. Beneath that respectable masculine uniform of coat and waistcoat and starched shirt lies the very garment we associate almost exclusively with the oppressed female form of the era, a corset. It feels almost scandalous to even think it. A corset. On him. The very idea seems to contradict everything he projects: strength, authority, masculinity, and yet the evidence is right there in that impossibly trim waistline. This wasn't a fringe practice reserved for a few oddballs. For a significant portion of the 19th century, a corset, or stay or belt, as it was often euphemistically called in men's advertisements, was a key component of a fashionable gentleman's wardrobe. It was the accepted tool for achieving the coveted silhouette. Of course, it was a secret tool. While women's corsetry was discussed, debated, and displayed, the male equivalent lived in the shadows, a thing to be worn but never, ever mentioned. It was the original business on the outside, party of structural engineering on the inside. Historians still argue whether this drive for a cinched male figure was a lingering echo of the military, where soldiers were
Oh, it
girdled to
suits you,
enforce
sir.
discipline and posture, or if it
Quite
was
the
a newer
dashing figure you
phenomenon,
make.
born
Indeed,
from
the
the
latest
increasingly
fashion.
sedentary lives of the middle-class men who sat in offices and counting houses all day. Whatever its origins, the result was the same men, in surprising numbers, were voluntarily encasing their torsos in restrictive underwear. It's a fascinating contradiction in an age obsessed with appearances. They were even willing to risk their health for it in ways that went beyond simple discomfort. The era's popular, vibrant green fabrics and wallpapers, for instance, often got their brilliant color from arsenic, a quirky tidbit of history that saw people literally poisoning themselves for a fashionable drawing room. Choosing a bold wallpaper was one thing, but choosing to physically reshape your own organs for a better waistline was another level of commitment entirely. And as you stand there, watching that gentleman disappear into the fog, you realize you've just scratched the surface of a very deep and very tightly laced story. That rigid, almost architectural silhouette of the gentleman disappearing into the London fog feels like the peak of some strange, new obsession. But it wasn't new at all. It wasn't born in the smog-choked alleys of the 19th century. To understand its origins, you have to let the image of that Victorian street dissolve, allowing the scent of coal smoke to be replaced by the sharper smell of wood smoke and old leather. We're drifting backwards, letting time slip through our fingers like fine sand, searching for the roots of this impulse to cage the male torso. And our first stop is a place of discipline and steel, the military parade ground. You find yourself standing on a vast, muddy field somewhere in 18th century Prussia. The air is cold and crisp. In front of you, rows upon rows of soldiers are being drilled into a single, terrifyingly precise human machine. Their posture is perfect, inhumanly so. Their backs are straight, their heads are high, their chests are puffed out. This uniformity isn't just the result of endless marching and harsh discipline. It's built into their clothes, beneath their brightly colored wool coats. Many of these men are wearing a form of stiffened vest or girdle. It might be made of thick leather or layers of canvas stiffened with glue. It's not designed to give them a tiny waist. That wasn't the goal here, but to force their bodies into the approved military posture. It prevents slouching, supports the back under the weight of a musket and pack, and creates that imposing, unwavering line of soldiers that was so psychologically effective on the battlefield. Scholars of material culture still debate whether these early military girdles were primarily for physical protection, like rudimentary body armor, or if their main function was always symbolic, designed to enforce the rigid posture of a disciplined soldier. In truth, it was likely both. A stiffened
it
garment
suits you,
offered
sir.
some minor protection from a sword slash,
Quite
but
the
its real
dashing
power
figure
was
you
in
make.
shaping the man.
Indeed, the latest
It was an
fashion.
instrument of control, turning a farmer or a baker into a sergeant, a component of the larger whole. It trained the body, and by extension the mind, to be upright, unyielding, and ever at attention. This military stay was the ancestor of the Victorian corset in function. If not in form, it established a powerful link between a controlled male torso and the ideals of discipline, order, and masculine strength. Now, Let the sounds of the drill sergeant fade. We're slipping back further still, leaving the muddy field for the perfumed, candle-lit halls of a royal court. You're now standing in the shadows of a great hall in Elizabethan England. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and roasting meat. Courtiers drift past, their clothes a riot of velvet, silk, and jewels. And here, the male silhouette is just as manipulated as the soldiers, but for entirely different reasons. You watch a nobleman approach, and your eyes are immediately drawn to his torso. He's wearing a doublet, a close-fitting jacket, but it's shaped like nothing you've seen before. It projects outwards from his chest before curving down sharply to the waist, ending in a distinct point. This is the infamous peas-cod belly. It looks, to your modern eyes, frankly bizarre. It's as if he's swallowed a small cannonball for breakfast. This shape was created by using stiff inner linings of canvas or buckram and stuffing the front of the doublet with bombast, a padding made from horsehair, wool, or raw cotton. This wasn't about military posture. This was about projecting wealth and status. The peas-cod belly mimicked the silhouette of a well-fed man, a man who didn't need to perform manual labor. It also created a line that was seen as powerful and virile, evoking the breastplate of a suit of armor. It was pure peacocking, trying to perform a deep, sweeping bow to Queen Elizabeth while wearing one of these contraptions must have been a core workout all on its own. Here, the stiffened garment isn't about discipline, but about display. It's a tool for fashion, a way to transform the natural lines of the body into a living sculpture that broadcasts power and prestige. So we have two clear lines of ancestry: the military girdle, emphasizing control and posture, and the aristocratic doublet, emphasizing fashion and status. But the impulse is older still. If we let the Elizabethan court dissolve and drift back thousands of years to the sun-drenched island of Crete during the Bronze Age, we find something truly startling. On the walls of ancient Minoan palaces, vibrant frescoes depict athletic, graceful figures, perhaps priests, perhaps bull leapers, perhaps gods.
Oh, it suits
And
you,
many of these
sir.
male figures are shown with shockingly
Quite the
narrow,
dashing figure you
wasp-like
make.
waists,
Indeed, the
cinched
latest
by
fashion.
what appear to be wide, ornate belts made of metal or thick, shaped leather. It seems our desire to artificially shape the male waist isn't a European invention, but a recurring human theme, thousands of years old. These ancient influencers didn't have social media to show off their impossible figures, just stunning frescoes that have lasted for millennia. These pre-Victorian men weren't wearing corsets in the 19th century sense. They weren't chasing the same V-shaped ideal as the gentleman in the London fog, but they were all participating in the same fundamental practice, using stiff, structured garments to manipulate the male torso for a desired social or aesthetic effect. They were girding themselves for power, whether that power was displayed on the battlefield through rigid discipline or in the royal court through extravagant fashion. These two powerful currents, the military demand for a controlled, upright posture and the aristocratic desire for a fashionable, statement-making silhouette, would flow down through the centuries, merging and evolving. They would eventually pour into the 19th century, creating the perfect cultural conditions for the rise of the Victorian gentleman's most hidden accessory. The stage was being set for a new kind of man, one who would combine the discipline of the soldier with the vanity of the courtier. That potent cocktail of military discipline and aristocratic vanity needed a crucible, a moment in time to bubble away and forge something new. You feel the centuries solidify around the turn of the 19th century, a period of immense upheaval. The French Revolution has decapitated the old way of doing things, and the Industrial Revolution is just beginning to churn out new money and a new class of man. This is the Regency, and into this shifting, uncertain world steps a new kind of hero, a man who will conquer society not with a sword or a title, but with a perfectly tied cravat. His name is George Brummel, better known as Beau, and he is the high priest of a new religion called dandyism. Before Brummel, a fashionable man was a macaroni, dripping in colorful silks, powdered wigs, lace cuffs, and garish buckles. It was a style that screamed its expense. The dandy, as personified by Brummel, was the complete opposite. You see him now, not in a glittering ballroom, but in the hushed, intense privacy of his dressing room on Chesterfield Street in London. The dandy's revolution was one of subtraction. He championed dark, exquisitely tailored wool coats, simple buff-colored trousers or breeches, and above all, immaculate linen. The new ideal was not to look rich, but to look perfect. His famous dictum was no perfumes, but very fine linen, plenty of it, and country
Oh, it
washing.
suits you,
He was
sir.
obsessed with cleanliness in an age that wasn't
Quite the dashing
allegedly
figure you
spending
make.
hours
Indeed,
scrubbing
the
himself clean
latest
each
fashion.
day. His entire aesthetic was one of studied, nonchalant elegance. Social historians debate whether the dandy, with his obsessive focus on the body and aesthetics, represented a new form of modern masculinity or was simply a final, flamboyant gasp of aristocratic privilege before the industrial age. He was, in a way, the first influencer. Though not born to high nobility, his sharp wit and unwavering self-confidence earned him the friendship of the most powerful man in the country, the Prince Regent, the future King George IV. With royal backing, Brummel's every choice became the law of fashion. But here lies the great irony, the secret that connects the dandy to our corseted Victorian gentleman. This new minimalist look was actually more demanding on the body than the flamboyant styles it replaced. When you're wearing a riot of silk and lace, the cut of the garment is secondary to the richness of the material. But when you're wearing a simple, dark wool coat, the only thing that matters is the cut. And for the cut to be perfect, the body underneath must be the perfect shape. You watch now as Brummel's famous hours-long dressing ritual unfolds. It's a process of construction far more intense than any Get Ready With Me video you've ever seen. After the endless washing and shaving, his valet begins to assemble the man. First, the clean linen shirt, then comes the foundation. To achieve the dandy's signature silhouette, unnaturally broad shoulders, a puffed-out pigeon chest, and a dramatically small, tapered waist, a man needed help. And there it is. The valet brings forward a pair of stays, not the heavy leather and steel contraptions of the military, but a lighter, yet still formidable, corset made of stiff fabric and reinforced with whalebone. Brummel stands patiently as it's wrapped around his torso and laced tight, cinching his waist and pushing his chest forward. It creates the smooth, rigid column upon which the rest of the artifice can be built. Only then can the starched cravat be tied, a process so legendarily difficult that a visitor once saw Brummel's valet descend the stairs with an armful of failed attempts, remarking, "These are our failures." The process had a higher rejection rate than a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Once the corseted torso is set, the tailored coat can be shrugged on, its padded shoulders exaggerating the width of his upper body in contrast to his newly tiny waist. The tight-fitting pantaloons are smoothed down, and finally, the boots are brought forth. In a move of almost comical extravagance, Brummel was said to have his boots polished with champagne, a quirky detail that perfectly captures the absurd perfectionism of the
it
dandy
suits you,
ethos.
sir.
It's probably not a great financial
Quite
strategy
the
for
dashing
footwear
figure
maintenance,
you make.
but it
Indeed,
certainly
the
makes a
latest
statement.
fashion.
The final product is a masterpiece of illusion, a man who appears elegantly, almost lazily simple, but whose form has been meticulously engineered for hours. This hourglass figure, built on a foundation of corsetry, became the absolute pinnacle of masculine style. It was the new uniform for any man with social aspirations. And Brummel, the architect of this look, wielded his power ruthlessly. His approval could make a man's career, and his disapproval could ruin it. His influence was so great that when he eventually had a falling out with his patron, the Prince Regent, he felt bold enough to snub him publicly. Spotting the prince walking with a companion, Brummel loudly asked the companion, "Alvinly, who's your fat friend?" The insult ended his career in England. Forced to flee to France to escape crushing debt, Brummel eventually died in poverty and obscurity. But the revolution he started could not be stopped. He had fundamentally changed the shape of menswear. He had created a new ideal of the masculine form, one that was athletic, elegant, and, crucially, artificially constructed. He had made the corset an essential, if secret, tool for the fashionable man. The Victorians were just around the corner, and they were taking notes. The dandy's hourglass figure would become their blueprint for the ideal gentleman. The Victorians were indeed taking notes, and the ink was barely dry on Beau Brummell's legacy when a new royal tastemaker arrived to codify it for a generation. You can feel the atmosphere shift as the Regency gives way to a new era. In 1837, a young woman of 18 years ascends to the British throne. Her name is Victoria, and her reign will be so long and so influential that it will give its name to the entire age. But she doesn't shape the culture alone. She is the political center, but the cultural heart of the early Victorian era is a partnership. It's a love story that will captivate the public and set the standard for everything from family values to, most importantly for us, the shape of a gentleman's body. We're talking, of course, about her husband, the German prince, Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. You're at a royal ball in the early 1840s, shortly after their wedding. The room glitters, the air hums with orchestral music and the low murmur of high society. Queen Victoria, small and formidable, is a confection of lace and silk, but your eyes, like the eyes of everyone else, are drawn to her consort. Prince Albert was, by all accounts, a remarkably handsome man. But more than that, he was impeccably fashionable. He was the living embodiment of the dandy ideal that Brummel had established. But with one crucial difference, he had the royal seal of approval.
Oh, it suits you,
He
sir.
was, in effect, the ultimate accessory to
dashing
power,
figure you make.
the nation's
Indeed,
first
the
gentleman,
latest fashion.
and he played the part to perfection. It was Victoria who had proposed to him, a neat inversion of tradition required by her status as the reigning monarch. This little quirky fact highlights the unique nature of their partnership. He might not have been king, but his influence was immense. They were a genuine team, the original celebrity power couple, and the public was obsessed. They single-handedly popularized the Christmas tree, championed the arts and sciences, and presented a picture of blissful domesticity that an entire empire sought to emulate. They were couple goals, just with more crown jewels and less brunch, and as part of this package, Albert's personal style became the aspirational look for every man in Britain and beyond. Look at any portrait of Albert from this period, particularly those by the great court painter Franz Xaver Winterhalter. You see a man in his prime, often in full military regalia, his chest broad and covered in medals and sashes. His shoulders are wide, his posture is ramrod straight, and his waist is startlingly, unnaturally small. That V-shaped torso, the hourglass figure that Brummel had pioneered in secret, was now on full public display, immortalized in oil paint and hung in palaces and galleries. Albert had taken the dandy silhouette and made it mainstream. He made it royal. He made it respectable. Historians still debate the extent of Prince Albert's personal vanity versus his strategic use of appearance. Was his tightly laced figure a simple matter of personal taste, or was it a calculated political move to present himself as a disciplined, modern, and thoroughly British consort? Despite his German origins, a cinched waist signaled self-control, a military-like discipline that would have reassured a public sometimes wary of a foreign influence so close to the throne. By adopting the aesthetic of the English dandy, he was visually assimilating, becoming the perfect English gentleman. Or perhaps he just liked the way it looked. The answer is probably a bit of both. Whatever the motive, the effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. If you were an ambitious clerk, a rising industrialist, or a young man of society, you wanted to look like Prince Albert. Tailors across London were flooded with requests for coats cut to create that same dramatic taper. Suddenly, every man in town seemed to develop a passionate interest in achieving the smallest possible waist. The fashion magazines, a growing industry, would feature engravings of the royal family, and men would take these images to their tailors as a template. The frock coat, the dominant garment of the era, was perfectly suited to this look, with its fitted waist and gently flared skirt that further exaggerated the slimness of the torso. Albert's influence wasn't just aesthetic. He was the
Oh,
driving
it
force
suits you,
behind the Great
sir.
Exhibition of 1851, that monumental
Quite the
celebration
dashing
of
figure you
industry and
make.
progress
Indeed, the
we
latest
glimpsed back in
fashion.
the London fog. This cemented his reputation not as a mere clothes horse, but as a serious, forward-thinking man. His fashionable silhouette, therefore, wasn't seen as frivolous. It was seen as the look of modernity, the shape of progress itself. To dress like Albert was to align yourself with the future. And so, the male corset completed its journey from the battlefield to the royal court. Beau Brummel had made it a tool for the elite, subversive dandy, but Prince Albert, with his handsome face, his royal status, and his impeccable public image, laundered its reputation. He took this secret instrument of vanity and transformed it into a symbol of respectability, discipline, and modern ambition. The question for the average Victorian man was no longer if he should strive for this shape, but how he could possibly achieve it. So, how exactly does one achieve the look of a progressive, royal-approved gentleman? What was this anatomical blueprint that Victorian men were so desperately trying to follow? Let's leave the grand ballrooms and step back into the quiet, analytical space of the tailor shop. You're standing before a full-length mirror, and we are going to build piece by piece the ideal masculine form of the 1840s and 50s. Forget the body you have. The body you need is a work of pure, deliberate construction with the anatomical proportions of a modern cartoon superhero. The dominant shape, the ultimate goal, is a dramatic V. It starts with the shoulders. They must be broad, powerfully so. They are the top of the V, the symbol of masculine strength. Your natural shoulders are irrelevant. A gentleman's coat was carefully constructed with internal padding, or wadding, sewn into the shoulder seams to create a breadth that few men possess naturally. This creates the powerful, imposing horizontal line from which the rest of the body will taper. Next, the chest. It can't be flat. The ideal is a proud, prominent, rounded form known as the pigeon breast. The chest should swell forward with confidence, a solid foundation for a decorative cravat pin. This effect was achieved partially by padding in the waistcoat, but mostly through the engineering of what lay beneath. The pressure of a tightly laced corset around the waist would naturally push the diaphragm and chest upwards and outwards, creating that heroic, puffed-out silhouette. You are, quite literally, rearranging your own internal mass to create a fashionable shape. And now, we come to the star of the show, the absolute focal point of the entire enterprise, the waist. After the broad shoulders and the full chest, your torso must pull inwards dramatically, creating the narrowest possible point.
Oh, it suits
This
you,
is where
sir.
nature most often fails to cooperate, and where
Quite
the
the
corset
dashing
does
figure
its
you
most
make.
important work.
Indeed, the latest
A
fashion.
gentleman's waist was expected to be trim, elegant, and almost impossibly small. This visual cue was everything. It spoke of refinement, of a man who was not a coarse labor. It signaled discipline and self-control. It was the linchpin of the entire V-shaped illusion, the dramatic pinch that made the shoulders above and the hips below seem even wider by comparison. The silhouette then flares out again subtly over the hips, an effect magnified by the cut of the frock coat, whose skirt was designed to hang away from the body. This completed the hourglass effect, a shape of striking, theatrical elegance. Cultural critics and fashion historians still debate whether this V-shape was an attempt to mimic the exaggerated forms of classical Greek sculpture, which was enjoying a major revival in the 19th century, or if it was a more direct imitation of the cuirass, the breastplate and backplate of a military uniform. Was the ideal gentleman trying to look like the statue of Apollo? Or was he trying to look like a soldier in shining armor? In a way, he was trying to be both a graceful artist-poet and a disciplined warrior, all in one. Of course, the glaring truth, as you see this shape being built upon your own reflection, is that it's almost entirely fake. It's an illusion. It is the 19th century equivalent of digital photo editing. Only you have to wear the filter all day, and it can make it difficult to breathe. This artificiality was precisely the point. In an era of new money and social mobility, achieving this difficult look was a way to separate yourself from the crowd. It showed you had the discipline to endure the discomfort and the financial means to afford the bespoke tailoring and secret underpinnings required to pull it off. And the obsession with anatomical perfection didn't stop at the torso. To achieve a truly harmonious line, the legs had to be considered as well. Trousers were often cut tightly, especially around the lower leg, to show off a well-turned calf. For men whose calves were not naturally well-turned enough, there was a solution: calf pads. Yes, men would wear padded inserts, a sort of falsie for the lower leg, to give the impression of muscular, shapely limbs. It's a whole new level of body anxiety to be worried about your calf-to-ankle ratio. But for the truly dedicated follower of fashion, no detail was too small. This obsessive body sculpting wasn't just seen as vanity, it was validated by the popular pseudoscience of the day. The fields of physiognomy and phrenology, which claimed you could read a person's character from their facial features and the shape of their skull, were hugely influential. This thinking extended to the whole body. A well-proportioned, upright body was believed to be an outward sign of an intelligent, virtuous,
Oh, it
and
suits
morally
you,
upright
sir.
mind. A slouching man with a
Quite the
paunch
dashing
wasn't just
figure you make.
unfit, he
Indeed,
was
the
morally
latest fashion.
suspect. Achieving the ideal V-shape wasn't just fashion, it was a moral imperative. This impossible, constructed, and deeply desired anatomy is the very heart of our story. It's the reason why a respectable Victorian gentleman would reach for a corset every single morning. He was simply putting on the body that was expected of him. That impossible, V-shaped body you were just constructing in the tailor's mirror wasn't merely a product of high fashion. While the civilian world chased this silhouette for status and social approval, one of the nation's most powerful institutions was enforcing a very similar shape for reasons of pure, unadulterated discipline. The ideal gentleman may have wanted to look like a soldier, but the actual soldier had no choice in the matter. So, let's leave the soft velvets of the tailor's shop and feel the rough, scratchy wool of a brand new army uniform. You've just taken the Queen's shilling, lured by posters of military glory, and now you stand shivering in a drafty barracks. Your civilian life is over. A drill sergeant, whose voice seems to be composed entirely of gravel and indignation, is yelling. He believes that slouching is the first step on a slippery slope to cowardice and treason. His mission is to build you into a soldier, and he starts by rebuilding your posture from the ground up. He hands you your gear, and among the boots and the tunic is a strange, stiff, and deeply uninviting garment. It's not called a corset here, it's a girdle, a belt, or perhaps just part of the regulation tunic itself, heavily reinforced with leather and stiff canvas. For the enlisted man, it's a crude, functional piece of equipment, a world away from the bespoke silk stays an officer might order from a private tailor. You're ordered to put it on. It feels like a cage. It wraps tightly around your midsection, and as the straps are pulled, it forces the air from your lungs. Your spine is instantly locked into a rigid, upright position. Your shoulders are thrown back, your chest pushed forward. Any thought of bending at the waist is a distant memory. The sergeant walks past, smacks your straightened back with satisfaction, and grunts his approval. This is how a soldier stands. The Army's motto might as well have been, "Look sharp, even if you can't breathe." The official justifications for this were practical. Of course, this girdle, they claimed, provided essential back support during long marches under the weight of a heavy pack, rifle, and 60 rounds of ammunition. It was meant to reduce fatigue and prevent injury. But as you stand there, struggling to take a full breath, you might question that logic. Military historians continued to debate the true effectiveness of these stays. Was the purported back support
Oh,
a
it
genuine
suits you,
benefit
sir.
on grueling campaigns? Or was it merely a
Quite the dashing
convenient
figure you
justification for
Indeed, the
regulations that
latest
were,
fashion.
at their core, about imposing psychological control and creating a visually impressive military spectacle? The truth is, the primary goal was discipline and uniformity. An army of ramrod-straight soldiers was an intimidating sight on the parade ground, and, hopefully, on the battlefield. It projected an image of invincible order and collective strength. Individuality was erased, replaced by a single, multi-limbed fighting machine. This obsession with posture was legendary. There were quirky, informal rules dictating that a soldier on parade should be able to stand so still that you could balance a coin on his head. The stays were the tool that made such absurd levels of physical control possible. For the officers, the corset served a dual purpose. It fulfilled the military requirement for posture while also satisfying the demands of civilian fashion. An officer was, after all, a gentleman, and he was expected to maintain the same elegant, V-shaped figure as his peers in London's high society. His corset was likely a finer, more comfortable, and more aggressively waist-cinching garment than the simple girdle issued to the men under his command, a subtle indicator of the class divide that was starkly present in every aspect of Victorian military life. The brutal flaw in this system was exposed when parade ground theory met the harsh reality of war. During the Crimean War in the 1850s, British soldiers were sent into battle in uniforms that were hopelessly impractical. They wore stiff leather stocks around their necks that made it difficult to turn their heads, and tight-fitting coatee jackets that, combined with their girdles, severely restricted their movement. A rigid posture is excellent for standing guard outside a palace, but it's a deadly liability when you need to run, crawl, or, duck. The Army's aesthetic priorities were shown to be dangerously out of step with the bloody reality of modern combat. Still, back home, the image of the soldier remained a powerful and respected one. Every time a regiment marched through a city, with their chests puffed out and their lines perfectly straight, they were providing a public demonstration of the corseted ideal. They linked the cinched waist and rigid posture not to the vanity of a dandy, but to the masculine virtues of duty, discipline, and patriotism. They were a constant, living advertisement for the idea that a controlled body was a respectable body. For any man watching from the crowd, it was a powerful message to stand tall and tight was to stand like a hero. To stand like a hero was a powerful motivator. But even heroes get backaches. The corset had the enthusiastic endorsement of the fashionable dandy and the stern approval of the military, creating a pincer movement of influence. But for the
Oh, it
practice to
suits you,
become
sir.
truly widespread, to seep into the
Quite the
lives of
dashing figure you
ordinary,
make.
Indeed, the
respectable,
latest fashion.
middle-class men, it needed one final, unassailable stamp of authority. It needed a doctor's prescription. And so you find yourself leaving the noisy parade ground and entering the hushed, intimidating consulting room of a respected London physician. The air inside is thick with the competing scents of carbolic acid, old paper, and beeswax polish. Sunlight struggles through a tall, grimy window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The furniture is dark, heavy, and serious. And behind a massive oak desk sits the doctor, a man whose stern expression and formal attire grant him an almost divine authority. This is the age of the rise of the medical professional, with new tools like the stethoscope, that single-eared wooden trumpet that allowed him to hear the secret workings of your heart and lungs. The doctor was seen as a master of the body's hidden mysteries. His word was not to be taken lightly. You describe your ailments: a general sense of fatigue, a dull ache in your back after a long day hunched over a desk in a poorly lit office, perhaps some digestive trouble. He listens intently, nodding gravely. He asks you to stand, to walk across the room. He observes your posture, tutting softly at the slight slouch you've developed from your modern, sedentary life. He then makes his diagnosis. Your spine, he declares, lacks tone. It has become weak, unable to properly support your frame. Furthermore, and more alarmingly, he suggests you may be suffering from a common affliction where the internal organs have a tendency to wander. This condition, known as visceroptosis, was a genuine medical theory of the time. The idea was that without proper abdominal support, your organs could literally shift downwards, leading to all manner of problems from constipation to melancholy. The diagnosis sounds terrifying, as if your kidneys are currently packing a small suitcase and planning a solo trip to Brighton. You, of course, are suitably concerned. The doctor reassures you there is a remedy. He doesn't reach for a prescription pad to write out a list of medicines. Instead, he describes an apparatus. He prescribes a spinal support, a postural brace, or an abdominal belt. He prescribes a corset. Medical historians fiercely debate the motivations behind these prescriptions. Were doctors genuinely convinced of the corset's therapeutic benefits based on the limited science of their day? Or were they cynically profiting from a lucrative market by medicalizing a pre-existing fashion trend? The truth, as is often the case, is likely somewhere in the middle. Many doctors probably did believe that providing external support could alleviate back pain and improve health.
Oh, it suits
But
you,
it was
sir.
also a booming business. Advertisements for
Quite the
these medical
dashing
corsets
figure you
filled the
make.
papers,
Indeed, the
promising
latest
cures
fashion.
for everything from lumbago to liver complaints. The list of conditions a corset could supposedly treat was impressively long. It was even prescribed for neurasthenia, a fashionable new diagnosis for a vague collection of symptoms, including anxiety, fatigue, and depression, often blamed on the frantic pace of modern urban life. The theory was that by stabilizing the physical body in a supportive brace, you could soothe the overwrought nervous system. It's hard not to wonder if the real cause of this nervous exhaustion was the stress of trying to hold a perfect posture all day while breathing at 50% capacity. And so, the doctor writes you a referral to a surgical appliance maker. The beauty of this medicalization was that it provided the perfect cover story. You are no longer a vain man trying to squeeze into a fashionable garment. You are a patient, dutifully following your doctor's orders to preserve your health. It was a prescription for well-being that, by the most wonderful coincidence, also happened to give you the trim, V-shaped waistline that was the height of fashion. No one could accuse you of being a foppish dandy if you could simply say, "My physician insisted upon it for my spine." It's the perfect alibi. With this medical seal of approval, the last barrier to the corset's acceptance crumbles. It is now endorsed by the three great pillars of masculine authority in the Victorian world: fashion, the military, and medicine. It is a tool for the stylish, a requirement for the soldier, and a treatment for the sick. It is no longer a simple matter of choice, a frivolous accessory. The male corset has successfully been rebranded as a necessity. So, you have your justifications in order. Fashion demands it, the military inspires it, and your doctor has prescribed it. The corset is no longer a frivolous want, but a respectable need. Your next stop is not a perfumed haberdashery, but the serious, functional workshop of a surgical appliance maker, or perhaps a discreet, specialized tailor. You are here to be fitted for the apparatus itself. But what is this thing? Really forget any image you have of delicate silk, frivolous lace, or bright satin ribbons. The gentleman's corset was a different beast entirely. It was a piece of engineering. You stand in a room that smells of tanned leather, machine oil, and starched cotton. Bolts of heavy, serious-looking fabric are stacked on shelves. The garment the maker shows you is built for business. The primary material is not silk, but coutil, a dense, herringbone pattern cotton twill woven specifically to withstand the immense strain of tight lacing without stretching or tearing. For more heavy-duty medical or sporting corsets,
Oh, it
the material
suits you,
might even be
sir.
leather, tough and unyielding,
Quite the
or
dashing
multiple
figure you
layers
make.
of stiffened
Indeed, the
canvas
latest
drill.
fashion.
The colors are sober and masculine white, ecru, gray, brown, or black. There is no decorative embroidery, no lace trim. This is not an object of seduction. It is an instrument of control. Curators and historians who study these surviving objects often debate the significance of their plainness. Was the lack of decoration a purely functional choice to make them invisible under a white shirt, or was it a deliberate masculinizing strategy to mentally separate the male support belt from the feminine corset, even if they served an identical purpose? Whatever the reason, the visual message was clear: this was a serious appliance for a serious man. Now let's look inside, at the skeleton that gives this garment its power. The channels stitched into the fabric are not empty. They are filled with bones. The most common and traditional material was whalebone. Now, it's important to know that whalebone is not bone at all. It's baleen, the flexible, keratinous plates that hang from the upper jaw of certain species of whales, used to filter krill and small fish from the water. It's the same stuff your fingernails are made of, but on an industrial scale. Baleen was the perfect material for high-end corsetry. It was incredibly strong, yet lightweight and flexible, and it would gradually mold to the wearer's body heat, offering a slight, grudging custom fit over time. But this was the age of industry, and a new material was becoming common: steel. Flat steel stays, coated to prevent rust, offered a rigidity that whalebone couldn't match. They were unyielding, enforcing a perfect line with absolute authority. For those who wanted a compromise between the unforgiving nature of flat steel and the flexibility of baleen, there was a high-tech innovation: watch spring or clock spring steel. These thin, flexible steel strips were advertised as being self-adjusting to the body's movements, offering support without total imprisonment. The list of materials: coutil, leather, baleen, steel sounds less like a piece of clothing and more like the inventory for building a small, very sturdy boat. Then there is the hardware. Running down the front of the corset is a busk. This consists of two long, wide steel stays, one fitted with metal studs and the other with metal loops. It allows you to fasten the corset down the front after it has been laced up the back, making the daily process of getting in and out of the thing marginally less of a two-person ordeal. The back is a line of formidable metal eyelets, or grommets, punched through the fabric to reinforce the lacing holes. They had to be strong, because the waxed cotton laces threaded through them would be pulled under immense tension. This was not intimate
it
apparel.
suits you,
It
sir.
was a personal suspension bridge. You hold
Quite
the
the
finished
dashing
product
figure
in your
you make.
hands.
Indeed,
It has
the
a
latest
surprising
fashion.
weight to it. It's stiff, solid, formidable. You can feel the hardness of the steel busk and the rigid bones through the thick fabric. It bends, but only with protest. It is an object that promises to reshape you, to grant you that ideal, V-shaped silhouette of power and prestige. But as you hold it, you can feel that it will not be a gentle embrace. It is a tool, an architecture for the body, and it will demand your surrender in return for the shape it gives. The next step is to put it on. The moment has come. The sun is filtering through your window, casting long shadows across the floor. The air is cool and still. Your daily ritual of construction is about to begin. You've finished your morning ablutions and now you stand before the mirror, ready to build the gentleman that the world expects to see. This process is a careful layering, an assembly that begins not with the corset itself, but with the garment designed to protect you from it. First, you pull on a long undershirt of fine, soft linen or cotton. It's loose-fitting and reaches down to your mid-thigh, serving as a crucial barrier. It will absorb perspiration, protecting the expensive, hard-to-clean corset from your body, and more importantly, it will protect your skin from the chafing and pinching of the stiff, heavily boned garment. It's a simple, practical layer of defense before the main event. Now, you take the corset. It feels as heavy and serious in the morning light as it did when you first held it. You wrap it around your midsection, over the thin undershirt. The first sensation is the shock of cold from the steel busk against your abdomen. You hold it in place and, with practiced fingers, begin fastening the front. You slot the metal studs into their corresponding loops, working your way down your torso, closing the two halves of the steel bust together. With a final click, you are enclosed, though not yet constricted. The corset hangs on you like a loose, stiff vest. For the next step, you need assistance. While some men's corsets were designed to be self-laced, achieving a truly fashionable line, or the tight cinch prescribed by your doctor, often required a second pair of hands. Your valet steps forward. This particular duty required not just dexterity, but a surprising degree of physical strength. A point of ongoing discussion among historians is the role of the valet. Was his assistance in lacing a purely practical, impersonal part of his duties, like polishing shoes, Or did the act create a unique and potentially complex physical intimacy between the two men? Your valet takes the long, strong laces at the back, which are already threaded through the metal eyelets in a specific pattern designed for maximum leverage.
Oh, it
He
suits
places
you,
a foot on
sir.
the small of your back for purchase, a common technique,
Quite the
and
dashing
begins to
figure you
pull.
make.
The
Indeed, the
laces
latest
whisper as
fashion.
they slide through the grommets. The first pull is gentle, taking up the slack, and the corset begins its hug. You feel a firm, even pressure wrapping around your ribs and waist. You're prompted to exhale, and as you do, the valet gives a second, much stronger pull. This is the moment of transformation. The air rushes from your lungs with an audible whoosh. You feel your internal organs shifting, compressing upwards to make way for the cinched-in waist. Your spine is forced into a perfectly straight, unyielding line. Any thought of slouching is now a physical impossibility. You feel solid, held, contained. It is a profoundly restrictive sensation, but perhaps not an entirely unpleasant one. There's a feeling of security, of being firmly held together. It's important to remember that most men, like most women, did not tight lace to the dangerous extremes you see in satirical cartoons. The goal for many was lacing to comfort, providing support in a moderate shape. But for the truly fashionable, like you, a tighter lace was required to achieve that dramatic V shape. As corsetry evolved, designers did try to make the experience less punishing. One quirky innovation was the spoon busk, where the bottom of the front steel busk was wider and curved outwards like the bowl of a spoon. This was designed to better cup the abdomen, distributing pressure more evenly and supposedly reducing the strain on your newly displaced organs. A small mercy. The lacing is now complete, the ends tied off securely. You take a shallow breath. Now for the final layers. Your valet hands you your starched shirt and cravat. Then comes the waistcoat, which now glides on and buttons up with satisfying smoothness. There is no wrinkling or bunching from the shirt underneath. Your corseted torso is a perfectly smooth column. Finally, you shrug on your frock coat. The entire garment now hangs perfectly. The padded shoulders align with your own. The nipped-in waist of the coat follows the new line of your body precisely, and the skirts flare out just so. You turn to the mirror. The man looking back at you is the finished product. His posture is impeccable. His silhouette is elegant and commanding. He is the very picture of a Victorian gentleman, ready to face the world. It's the 19th century equivalent of wearing industrial-strength Spanx. But with the architectural integrity of a small bridge, the illusion is complete. You are a masterpiece of construction, a walking sculpture ready to present yourself to the world. Your silhouette is impeccable, your posture a testament to discipline, but the entire illusion is fragile, held together by a secret you must guard with your life. The architecture beneath your waistcoat, the very foundation of your respectable appearance,
Oh, it
is
suits
also
you,
your
sir.
greatest vulnerability. To be discovered as a
Quite the
man who
dashing
wore a
figure you
corset
make.
would be
Indeed,
catastrophic.
the latest fashion.
It was a practice shrouded in profound social anxiety, and the process of simply acquiring the garment was an exercise in the utmost discretion. How do you buy something that you cannot be seen buying? For the wealthy man of leisure, the trusted relationship with a bespoke tailor or a specialist corset maker, like the one we visited, was one option. In the hushed, confidential chambers of a high-end establishment, a man's secrets were safe. But what about the middle-class clerk, the provincial professional, or any man who simply couldn't bear the thought of a face-to-face consultation? For them, the Industrial Revolution provided a wonderfully modern solution: mail order. The establishment of reliable, affordable postal services, like Britain's uniform penny post, combined with the expanding railway network, created a new world of remote commerce. Suddenly, you could buy almost anything from the comfort of your own home and have it delivered directly to your door. This was the perfect system for purchasing items of a sensitive nature. And so, you find yourself sitting in your parlor, flipping through the pages of a popular gentleman's magazine or a newspaper, tucked between advertisements for life insurance and miraculous hair tonics. You find them. The ads are masterpieces of euphemism. They almost never use the word corset. Instead, you see listings for the health body belt, the improved chest expander, the hygienic abdominal support, or the spinal brace. The language is all about masculine pursuits and medical necessity. They promise to give you vigor, improve your manly bearing, offer support during athletic exertions, and prevent the fatigue that comes from a long day of brain work. They are sold not as tools of vanity, but as essential health appliances. It was the 19th century equivalent of telling your friends you only watch historical documentaries on YouTube when your watch history is filled with cat videos. Historians who study consumer culture debate how effective these euphemisms really were. Did men genuinely believe they were buying a health appliance? Or was it a shared social fiction, a polite lie that everyone involved, the buyer, the seller, and society at large silently agreed to uphold to avoid embarrassment? The answer is likely that it served both purposes. It allowed a man to justify the purchase to himself as a sensible health decision, while simultaneously achieving the fashionable figure he secretly desired. Some sellers took the medical justification to extraordinary, almost comical, extremes. You might see an advertisement for a quirky and futuristic-sounding device, the electric corset. These garments were fitted with zinc and copper discs that, when activated by the body's perspiration, would supposedly generate a mild galvanic current. This electricity was claimed to cure everything from indigestion and kidney trouble to nervous debility and weak circulation. It was pure quackery,
Indeed, the latest
cloaking a
fashion.
simple support garment in the exciting, modern language of science. The only shock you were likely to get from one of these was when you saw the bill for it. Once you've made your selection, you discreetly mail your payment and measurements to the company. Then you wait. A week or two later, a parcel arrives. It's delivered by the postman along with the daily letters, and there is nothing about it to raise suspicion. It is wrapped in plain, sturdy brown paper and tied with simple string. There is no company name, no illustration of the contents. It is the direct ancestor of every incognito browser window and discreetly packaged delivery of the modern age. You can take it up to your room and unwrap your purchase in absolute privacy. This entire clandestine industry existed to serve as a deep contradiction at the heart of Victorian masculinity. A man was expected to project an image of effortless, natural superiority, yet the ideal physical form to do so was profoundly unnatural. He had to engage in a secret, almost shameful practice of body modification in order to appear perfectly and respectably normal. The plain brown wrapper was more than just packaging. It was a symbol of the tightrope the modern gentleman had to walk every single day. And why was that secrecy so vital? Why the hushed consultations, the medical euphemisms, the plain brown wrappers? To find the answer, you just have to step out of your private dressing room and walk down a bustling London street. You don't have to look far. There, ahead, a small crowd is gathered, pointing and laughing at the window of a print shop. This window is the 19th century equivalent of a viral social media feed, and what's being displayed is a brutal public shaming. This is where the court of public opinion held its daily, merciless session. Before photography was widespread, and long before television or the internet, the satirical print was one of the most powerful forms of mass media. These engravings, often hand-colored, were produced quickly, sold cheaply, and displayed prominently for all to see. They were the political cartoons, the celebrity gossip columns, and the savage internet memes of their day, all rolled into one. And one of their favorite targets was the fashionable man, specifically the fashionable man and his secret underpinnings. You push your way through the chuckling onlookers to get a better view. The print in the window, brightly and garishly colored, is by an artist like the great George Cruikshank, a master of caricature. His pen was a weapon, and he aimed it squarely at the vanity and absurdity he saw in modern life. The print depicts a scene of domestic chaos, a foppish-looking gentleman, his face a mask of agony and effort, is clinging desperately to a bedpost. His valet,
it suits you,
a
sir.
tiny straining figure with his foot planted firmly on his master's backside, is
Indeed,
pulling
the
with all
latest
his
fashion.
might on a set of corset laces. Another pair of broken laces lies discarded on the floor. The gentleman's body is contorted into a shape that defies all laws of anatomy. A massive, puffed-out chest, a waist no bigger than his neck, and hips that flare out like a ballerina's tutu. His spine seems to have been replaced with a question mark. The details are cruel and specific. The man's expression is one of narcissistic torment. His room is littered with powders, potions, and discarded cravats. He is a fool, a slave to fashion, enduring self-inflicted torture to achieve a ridiculous ideal. The message is clear and brutal. This is not masculinity. This is weakness, vanity, and laughable effeminacy. The artist had a particular genius for drawing men who looked like they were one deep breath away from launching a waistcoat button into orbit. Art historians and sociologists debate the primary target of these satires. Were they truly attacking the practice of corsetry itself? Or were they using the image of the corseted dandy as a convenient symbol to critique broader social anxieties about class, consumerism, and shifting gender roles? The corseted man was often portrayed as Frenchified, a classic insult suggesting he had abandoned solid, straightforward English values for foreign fripperies. He was the opposite of the idealized John Bull, the stout, hardy, and emphatically uncorseted symbol of true Englishness. By laughing at the man in the corset, the public was reinforcing its own idea of what a real man should be. These prints were everywhere. A gentleman couldn't walk through the city without being confronted by these mocking images of himself. It was the constant, low-level threat of exposure, the fear that the laughing crowd outside the print shop could one day be laughing at him. This is what drove the practice so deep underground. This is what fueled the entire industry of discretion. The medical language, the sober materials, the plain packaging, it was all a defense mechanism against the savage pen of artists like Cruikshank. It's fascinating to consider that these works of high satire were also products of industry. A single print would be designed and engraved on a copper plate by the master artist. But the printing and, crucially, the coloring were often done by teams of anonymous workers, frequently women and children, who would apply the watercolor washes in an assembly line fashion. There was a whole hidden economy behind this public mockery. So you stand there in front of the window, your own corseted torso held rigidly in place beneath your respectable coat. You force a chuckle to blend in with the crowd, but inside a cold knot of anxiety forms. The laughter is a powerful weapon, a tool of social policing.
Oh,
It's a
it suits
constant
you,
reminder
sir.
that while society might demand you have a certain
Quite a
shape,
dashing figure
it will
you make.
viciously mock
Indeed, the
you if it
latest
ever
fashion.
discovers the tools you used to build it. The jeering of the crowd follows you as you turn away from the window and continue down the street, holding your posture just a little more stiffly than before. So why take that risk? Why endure the discomfort, the cost, and the ever-present threat of being exposed in a vicious satirical cartoon? Because while the outside world might laugh, in the private internal logic of the Victorian mind, the story you told yourself was entirely different. It was a story of virtue, discipline, and moral strength. Controlling your body was about so much more than fitting into a fashionable coat. It was about mastering your own soul. You feel it now. The constant, firm pressure of the stays around your torso. It is not just a physical sensation. It is a moral reminder. In the 19th century worldview, the body and the mind, or more accurately, the character, were inextricably linked. A lazy, slouching body was seen as the sign of a lazy, undisciplined mind. An upright posture was the physical manifestation of an upright character. By physically forcing your body into a state of rigid control, you were demonstrating to yourself and to the world your mastery over the base, unruly weaknesses of the flesh. It was a way to achieve a higher moral plane, one shallow breath at a time. This philosophy was particularly potent for the rising middle class. Unlike the aristocracy, who had inherited status, the new industrial and professional classes had to earn it and, more importantly, prove they were worthy of it. Sociologists and historians continue to explore the class dimension of this ideology. Was this emphasis on bodily control a genuine moral philosophy, or was it primarily a tool for the rising middle class to distinguish themselves from what they perceived as the undisciplined, chaotic, and physically loose working class? A man who controlled his own physical form was clearly a man in control of his destiny, a man fit to run a business, a firm, or even an empire. The corset, in this context, becomes a class marker, a quiet assertion of civilized superiority. It was your personal, wearable life coach. Every time you sat down to a meal, the constriction around your stomach was a physical check against the sin of gluttony. It was impossible to gorge yourself when your stomach had nowhere to expand. The corset was a constant companion whispering, "Are you quite sure you need that second helping of pudding?" When you felt tired and wanted to slouch at your desk, the unyielding steel and whalebone held you erect, a silent rebuke to the sin of sloth. It's difficult to give in to your baser urges when you're most urgent. All-consuming desire is simply to find a comfortable way to sit down. The daily discomfort
Oh,
was
it suits
reframed
you,
as a
sir.
valuable exercise in character building, a
Quite the
testament to
dashing
your
figure you
willpower.
make.
This
Indeed,
belief
the
system
latest
found a
fashion.
powerful voice in the movement known as muscular Christianity, which became popular from the 1840s onwards, championed by writers and thinkers like Thomas Hughes and Charles Kingsley. It promoted the idea that physical fitness, discipline, and even hardship were essential components of a righteous Christian life. It linked physical strength with moral fiber and patriotic duty. While we might see a contradiction between the artificial constriction of a corset and the athletic freedom espoused by muscular Christianity, the underlying principle was the same: discipline over the body was a path to spiritual and moral strength. The corset was just a different kind of training regimen. Later in the century, this impulse for bodily control would be taken to even greater extremes by health reformers like the American doctor John Harvey Kellogg. Yes, the man who would give the world cornflakes. He was a fervent advocate for biologic living, a highly disciplined lifestyle intended to curb all unhealthy appetites and passions. His regimens at his Battle Creek Sanitarium involved strict vegetarian diets, rigorous exercise, and a variety of hydrotherapies and other treatments. While he was more focused on diet than corsetry, he was part of the same broad cultural movement that saw the body as a wild beast that needed to be tamed through constant, vigilant self-control. And so, the corset becomes more than an undergarment. It is a piece of moral technology, a tool for self-improvement. The quiet satisfaction you feel, looking at your upright, contained reflection in the mirror, is not just vanity, it is a sense of virtuous accomplishment. You have taken the unruly, imperfect vessel of your body and imposed upon it order, discipline, and grace. In the great Victorian battle between the civilized mind and the primal body, you, with the help of your leather and steel ally, were winning. The corset, then, was your silent partner in the moral project of self-mastery, a constant physical check on the unruly body. Its rigid embrace seems perfectly suited to the static life of the Victorian era, for sitting upright in an office, for standing straight in a receiving line, for remaining composed during a long church service. But what happened when the gentleman's life became dynamic? What about his leisure, his moments of vigorous physical exertion? Surely this is where the body had to be free. But you would be wrong. Welcome to the strange and deeply paradoxical world of the sporting corset. The air is sharp and cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and old leather. All around you is the controlled chaos of a fox hunt preparing to get underway, the yelping and whining of the hounds, the low nickering of horses, the chatter of fellow riders dressed in their iconic scarlet coats. This is the pinnacle
Oh,
of
it
country
suits
sport,
you, sir.
the high-octane, socially crucial
Quite
event.
the dashing figure
And as you
make.
prepare to mount your
Indeed,
horse
the
for a
latest
long,
fashion.
grueling day of riding and jumping, you perform one final essential step in your dressing routine. You strap yourself into your hunting belt. This is not the same garment you might wear to a dinner party. It is a sturdier, often more robustly constructed corset, perhaps made of thick coutil or even leather. It might feature panels of elastic, a marvelous new invention to allow for a little more give. Its purpose, you tell yourself and anyone who might ask, is purely functional support. A day in the saddle, galloping across uneven terrain and taking fences, is punishing on the lower back. This belt supports your spine, reduces fatigue, and ensures you maintain the correct, elegant equestrian posture, even when your muscles begin to tire. The poor fox, one might joke, has a distinct advantage, being entirely unencumbered by whalebone undergarments. But as you sit astride your horse, feeling the familiar pressure around your waist, you are confronted with a central paradox. How can a garment designed to restrict you actually help in a dynamic sport? Sports historians debate whether these athletic belts actually enhance performance by providing support, or if they were a detriment to it, with their use being driven more by the social pressure to maintain a fashionable silhouette even during leisure activities. Was it about being a better rider, or just looking like one? The hunting field was as much a social stage as any London ballroom. Your form over a fence was judged just as critically as your posture while waltzing. A sloppy, slouching rider was a figure of scorn, so perhaps the corset prevented some injuries. But the main injury it prevented was to one's social standing. This strange logic was not confined to riding. The idea of the corset as an athletic support system extended to a surprising number of gentlemanly pursuits. For the fencer, a corset ensured an upright, unyielding posture, which was critical to proper form. For the cricketer, it could offer back support during the strenuous, repeated motion of bowling, and for the marksman, there was even the shooting stay. This quirky Yimanowe specialized garment was often reinforced with extra padding or a leather patch on one shoulder, designed to help absorb the powerful recoil of a shotgun or rifle. It was, in a way, the original form of tactical gear, just significantly more structural. The Victorian mind resolved this seeming contradiction between restriction and movement with that one key word: support. They didn't think of the corset as something that stopped them from moving. They saw it as something that stopped them from moving incorrectly. By holding the torso in a solid, stable column, it prevented the wasteful, inefficient, and
Oh, it
aesthetically
suits you,
unpleasing
sir.
movements of slouching or bending
Quite
improperly.
the dashing figure
It
you
braced the
make.
body,
Indeed, the
allowing
latest
the
fashion.
limbs to do their work from a strong, secure foundation. So, here you are, thundering across an open field, the hunting horn sounding in the distance. You are in the midst of the most physically liberating pursuit a gentleman can enjoy, yet you are still contained, still held fast by that hidden architecture. The sporting corset represents the final frontier of the garment's conquest of the male wardrobe. It had infiltrated the office, the drawing room, the barracks, and the doctor's consulting room. Now, it had followed you into the great outdoors. There was, it seemed, no corner of a gentleman's life, no matter how active or free, that was truly beyond the corset's rigid, supportive, and inescapable embrace. The corset, in its many guises, seems to have been an essential part of a gentleman's life, a constant companion from the quiet of the office to the thunder of the hunting field. But this narrative has been one of privilege, of men with the time and money to pursue fashion, health, and sport. What about the vast majority of men in Victorian Britain? What about the man who didn't ride a horse to hunt, but lifted a crate onto a wagon? The man whose daily exertion wasn't a choice, but the grim necessity of survival. Did the corset, in any form, touch the lives of the working class? To find the answer, you must leave the crisp country air behind you. Let the scent of leather and horse fade, and replace it with the thick, acrid smell of coal smoke, sweat, and churned-up earth. You are standing beside a deep, raw cutting in the landscape, a place of mud and noise. This is the new frontier of the Victorian age, a railway line under construction. And the men building it are the legendary navvies, the army of manual laborers who laid down the iron arteries of the nation. Their work is brutal. You watch them swing pickaxes into the clay, their movements powerful and rhythmic. They heave massive rocks and shovel tons of earth into wheelbarrows. Their bodies are not projects of aesthetic refinement. They are engines of pure physical force. The V-shaped silhouette of the gentleman is a meaningless abstraction here. The primary physical concern for these men is not achieving a tiny waist, but getting through the day without a slipped disc, a pulled muscle, or a hernia that could end their career and plunge their family into destitution. And yet, as you watch them work, you notice something familiar, Many of the men, stripped to the waist in the summer heat, wear a piece of equipment wrapped tightly around their midsection. It is not a corset of coutil and whalebone. It is a belt, a very wide, very thick, very sturdy belt made of tough, undyed leather, fastened with a large, heavy buckle of iron or brass.
Oh, it suits
This
you,
is the
sir.
Navy's girdle, his kidney belt,
Quite the
and while it
dashing
bore
figure
no
you make.
resemblance to the
Indeed, the
fashionable
latest
stays of a
fashion.
gentleman, it served a remarkably similar function torso support. When cinched tight, this leather belt acted just like a modern weightlifter's belt. It increased intra-abdominal pressure and supported the lower back, providing a crucial brace against the immense strain of lifting, digging, and hauling. It wasn't designed to make a man's waist look smaller. It was designed to stop his spine from looking like a piece of dropped spaghetti. While a gentleman's corset might whisper self-discipline, a laborer's belt screamed, "Don't throw your back out." Social historians debate how to classify these belts. Should they be considered a form of proletarian corsetry, sharing a common ancestry of torso support, or are their origins and purpose so fundamentally different from the gentleman's stay that they represent a completely separate tradition of dress? There is no easy answer. The gentleman wore his corset to create an artificial shape that signaled he did not perform manual labor. The navvy wore his belt precisely because he performed manual labor. Despite being purely functional tools, these belts could also be a place for personal expression. This is our quirky tidbit. Some laborers would decorate their belts with polished brass studs, emblems representing their trade or work gang, or other small tokens. In a world that often viewed them as an anonymous mass of muscle, these small decorations were a way to assert a sliver of individuality and pride in their work. So, the answer to our question is a nuanced one. No, the working-class man did not wear a corset in the way a gentleman did. He was not chasing a fashionable silhouette, but he absolutely wore a rigid, supportive garment around his waist for a clear and practical purpose. The gentleman wore a corset to create an illusion. The laborer wore a belt to survive a reality. They were two strikingly similar solutions to two vastly different problems, separated by a chasm of social class, yet wrapped around the very same part of the human body. One man cinched himself in to climb the social ladder, the other to stay on his feet. The gentleman cinches himself for status, the laborer for survival. We've seen how this one garment, in its different forms, was woven into the very fabric of British class structure. But the 19th century was an age of steam and speed, an era of transatlantic connection where ideas and fashions traveled almost as fast as people. So, did this peculiar, quintessentially European practice manage to cross the ocean? Could the male corset find a home in the famously practical, egalitarian, and rugged society of the United States of America? To find out, you board a steamship. The journey is long, the air thick with salt spray and the thrum of the engine.
Oh, it suits you,
You
sir.
leave behind the old world of established
Quite the
aristocracy
dashing
and head
figure
towards
you
a
make.
nation that
Indeed,
defined
the
itself
latest
in
fashion.
opposition to it. Finally, you arrive in the chaotic, clamoring heart of Atlantic City. This is a new world, a city crackling with ambition, commerce, and a fierce pride in its own democratic, no-nonsense spirit. This is the land of the self-made man, the frontiersman, the rugged individualist. It seems like the least likely place on earth for a man to willingly strap himself into a whalebone cage for the sake of a trim waistline. And yet, Wanchon, you soon discover that America is not a monolith. While some Americans were out on the frontier, a New York dandy might be wrestling with his corset laces in the established old money enclaves of the East Coast, New York's Fifth Avenue, Boston's Beacon Hill, Philadelphia's Rittenhouse Square. A different ideal persisted. Here lived an American aristocracy, a class of people who, despite their nation's republican values, looked to London and Paris as the arbiters of true sophistication. They went on the grand tour of Europe, they imported their tailors, and they subscribed to the fashion magazines, and they brought the V-shaped silhouette home with them. Here you meet the American dandy, the Yankee fop. He is a fascinating and conflicted figure. American studies scholars debate his motives. Was his adoption of European fashion a simple act of emulation, a sign of a young nation's cultural insecurity? Or was it a deliberate, almost political act of defiance against the rising tide of Jacksonian democracy with its noisy celebration of the common man? Whatever the reason, this man used fashion as a weapon and a shield. By adopting the corseted figure of a European gentleman, he was drawing a very clear line between himself and the rough-hewn masses, the new money industrialists, and the unpolished politicians of his own country. He was, in a sense, the original hipster, embracing an obscure European trend that the rest of the country simply didn't get. This trend had its regional hotspots. In the early 19th century, a group known as the Baltimore Beaux became infamous for their devotion to dandyism. These wealthy, hard-partying young men were notorious for their duels, their debts, and their impeccable, tightly laced appearances, proving the trend had put down firm roots in American soil. The corset had successfully cleared customs. Naturally, in a country as boisterous and opinionated as America, this did not go unnoticed or unopposed. The corseted dandy became a stock figure of ridicule in newspapers and theatrical comedies. He was portrayed as lazy, effeminate, and fundamentally un-American. This sentiment was particularly sharp during times of economic distress. After the great financial crash known as the Panic of 1837, when thousands lost their jobs and homes, the sight of a dandy strolling down Broadway in his impossibly tight trousers and perfectly cinched coat was not just foolish, it was insulting. It was a symbol of aristocratic decadence in a land of Republican suffering. So the male corset's life in America was a contentious one. It found a welcoming home among a small, wealthy, and overwhelmingly urban elite who used it for the exact same reason as their British counterparts, to signal a refined status and a separation from the world of labor. For these men, it was a secret badge of belonging to a more sophisticated international class. The V-shape was the quiet uniform of an American aristocracy that wasn't supposed to exist. It may not have conquered the frontier, but it certainly captured a small, well-defended beachhead in the drawing rooms of the Eastern Seaboard. Whether you find yourself strolling down a fashionable London street or a bustling New York Avenue, the social pressures are immense, a constant hum in the background of your thoughts. But for now, let's tune out that external world, block out the rattle of the carriages, the judgment of the passers-by, and the whispers of satire. Let's turn our attention inward, to the very center of your being, and focus on the simple, vital, and now surprisingly difficult act of breathing. You are standing perfectly still, your posture immaculate thanks to your hidden ally. Now it's just for a moment. Try to take a deep, satisfying belly breath. The kind of breath that fills you from the bottom up, the kind you take without thinking. You inhale, but something is wrong. Your breath hits a wall, your diaphragm, the great muscle at the base of your lungs, tries to contract and move downwards to pull air in, but it can't. It's blocked by the rigid, unyielding pressure of the corset cinched around your waist. Your lower ribs, which should expand outwards like bellows, are locked in place by whalebone and steel. That deep, natural, efficient way of breathing is no longer available to you. Your body, clever and desperate, must find another way. It shifts the entire effort of respiration upwards into your chest. This is called costal breathing. You are now breathing only with the very top portion of your lungs, using the small intercostal muscles between your upper ribs to lift and expand your chest a tiny amount with each inhalation. Your breaths become shallower, quicker, and far less efficient. You have to take more of them to get the same amount of oxygen, putting a constant, low-level strain on your heart. Biomedical historians and historical reenactors debate the degree of adaptation the human body is capable of. Did long-term corset wearers develop stronger intercostal muscles to compensate for the disabled diaphragm? Or were they in a perpetual state of low-level hypoxia, subtly affecting their energy levels and cognitive function throughout the day? The 19th century medical community certainly had its concerns. Doctors frequently wrote about the dangers of lacing, linking the practice mostly to women. but the physiology is identical to a host of ailments. The most common was the simple fainting spell, a moment of dizziness caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. This is why smelling salts, potent vials of ammonium carbonate, were such a common accessory. A gentleman might keep a small bottle in his waistcoat, ready to be waved under his own nose, or that of a lady, after a particularly tight waltz in a stuffy ballroom. Feigning gracefully was a useful, if unintended, the social skill. Now you have to do more than just stand here breathing. You have to interact. You have to speak. You open your mouth to greet an acquaintance across the room, to call for a carriage, or to make a point at a business meeting. But the words don't come out with the easy, resonant power you're used to project your voice, to give it richness and authority. You need a strong, steady column of air pushed from deep within your lungs, controlled by your diaphragm. You no longer have that. Your voice is now supported only by the small, shallow puffs of air from your upper chest. It feels weaker, thinner. You might find your pitch is slightly higher than usual. You run out of breath halfway through a long sentence, forcing you to pause awkwardly to snatch another quick, shallow gasp. A lengthy conversation at a dinner party becomes a marathon of breath management. Giving a passionate speech to a crowd would be a Herculean feat. Risking a grand finale where you pass out on the podium, the new motto for all your conversations must be short and sweet, mostly because you simply don't have the air for long and bitter. The corset, you realize, has done more than just reshape your torso. It has fundamentally re-engineered your most basic bodily functions. It has hijacked your autonomic nervous system. The unconscious acts of breathing and speaking have been transformed into conscious, carefully managed efforts. They have become, like your posture and your clothing, just another part of the constant, exhausting performance of being a gentleman. You've learned to manage your breath, to speak in carefully measured phrases from the top of your lungs. You have adapted, or so you think, to life inside your cage. But now, as evening falls, you face a new and formidable challenge, one that strikes at the very heart of Victorian social life. You must learn not just how to breathe in your corset, but how to eat in it. You are cordially invited to a dinner party. You take your seat at a long, polished mahogany table, gleaming under the light of a gasolier. The table is a work of art, set with a dazzling array of silverware, crystal glasses, and fine china. The air is warm and filled with the murmur of polite conversation, and then the food begins to
Quite the
arrive.
dashing figure
This
you
is
make.
not a simple
Indeed,
three-course
the
meal.
latest fashion.
A formal Victorian dinner was a culinary siege, a relentless parade of dishes designed to showcase the host's wealth and generosity. First, a soup, then a fish course, then a light entree, followed by the main event, the roast, which might be accompanied by another joint of meat. After that, a game course, then puddings, jellies, ice creams, and finally a savory before the ladies retire and the gentlemen are left to their port and cigars. You look at this magnificent spread, a testament to the bounty of the empire, and then your awareness returns to your own midsection. The corset, your constant companion, is there holding you firm, and you are about to encounter a simple, immovable law of physics. When you eat, your stomach is designed to expand. Your corset is designed to do the exact opposite. This is the immovable object meeting the unstoppable force, and your abdomen is the battlefield. The soup arrives. It smells divine. You pick up your spoon and take a small, delicate sip. You take another. After only a few spoonfuls, you feel a familiar sensation of fullness that seems entirely disproportionate to the amount you've consumed. Your stomach, with no room to expand outwards, can only expand upwards, pressing against your already compromised diaphragm. You have to eat with agonizing slowness, taking tiny bites and chewing meticulously, giving your digestive system a fighting chance to process the food before the next spoonful arrives. Food historians and social scientists debate the true impact of this on Victorian dining habits. Did the widespread use of corsets subtly contribute to a culture of dietary restraint and delicate appetites among the upper classes? Or did it simply lead to a great deal of hidden, post-dinner suffering, and a booming trade in indigestion remedies. Observing the performance around you, you suspect it's the latter. Everyone is projecting an air of nonchalant enjoyment. But you know that beneath the waistcoats and gowns, many are fighting the same internal battle as you. What happens if you miscalculate, if you indulge in one bite too many of the roast beef, or a particularly tempting slice of pudding? The consequences are immediate and unpleasant. A feeling of intense pressure builds. Heartburn, a common complaint, feels like a hot poker rising in your chest. Trapped gas creates painful bloating. It takes every ounce of your self-control to maintain a pleasant expression, to engage in witty banter with your neighbor, while inside you are in a state of digestive emergency. You politely decline the offer of more wine, not out of temperance, but out of a legitimate fear of launching a waistcoat button across the table. It was, without a doubt, the most effective, if punishing, diet plan ever invented. The problem was so common that some manufacturers offered a quirky, specialized solution, the digestive corset or dinner corset. These models were sometimes made with elastic side panels or featured a lacing system that could be discreetly and quickly loosened a notch or two, providing a small amount of relief without having to retreat to a private room for a full delacing. As the epic meal finally concludes and the men retire to the smoking room, you can feel a collective, unspoken sigh of relief. The conversation may be of politics or business, but the underlying mood is one of quiet, groaning recovery. You have survived the ordeal. You have eaten just enough to be polite, but not enough to cause a medical incident. You have successfully performed the role of a man with a refined, delicate appetite. The corset has once again allowed you to maintain the perfect illusion. But the price was the simple pleasure of enjoying the feast so lavishly laid before you. This silent, internal battle fought at the dinner table was mirrored by a much louder and more public conflict fought in the pages of the very newspapers and magazines you might read after your meal. The question of whether a man should wear a corset was far from settled. In fact, it was the subject of a fierce, passionate, and surprisingly long-running public debate. To witness it, you need only settle into a comfortable armchair in your club, unfold a copy of Numerats, the Times, or the Englishwoman's Domestic Magazine, which, despite its name, had many male readers, and turn to the correspondence column. This letters to the editor section was the great public forum of the 19th century. It was the era's internet comments section, its talk radio, its social media feed, all condensed into dense columns of tiny print. Here, ordinary citizens could voice their opinions, and they had very strong opinions indeed about everything from colonial policy to the proper way to make tea. And, it seems, they had an inexhaustible supply of opinions about their fellow man's underwear. Your eyes scan the page and land on a letter under the heading, "On the subject of gentlemanly support," the author, signing himself an admirer of discipline, writes with calm, rational prose. "Sir," his letter begins, "I must take issue with a previous correspondent's slander against the use of well-fitted stays for men. Far from being a sign of vanity, the wearing of such a support is a mark of self-respect. It corrects the slovenly posture so common in this sedentary age, provides a wholesome check upon the figure, and allows a gentleman's tailor to properly execute his art. It is an instrument not of vanity, but of discipline and decorum." You can almost picture the author, a man of principle, sitting at his desk, defending his choice with quiet conviction. But a few days later, a blistering response appears. This one is signed simply, John Bull. The tone is not calm. It is a roar of indignation. To the editor, it thunders. Is there any sight more contrary to nature than a man who trusses himself up in the whalebone contraptions of the fairer sex? This is not discipline. It is emasculation. The true Englishman stands on his own 2 feet, his form shaped by honest work and wholesome living, not by the arts of the French corset maker. Let us have men with backbones of their own, not those imported from the sea. And so it begins. This exchange might spark a correspondence war, a quirky but common phenomenon where a single topic would ignite weeks, sometimes months, of back and forth letters from readers. An admirer of discipline would be answered by a hater of humbug, who would then be refuted by one who values health. Even the medical journals got involved. An article might appear in the prestigious pages of The Lancet, perhaps citing cases of digestive distress or respiratory trouble caused by tight lacing, only to be met with letters from physicians who prescribed spinal supports for their patients and swore by their therapeutic benefits. Literary scholars and media historians debate the authenticity of some of these letters. Were they all genuine outpourings from concerned citizens? Or did editors sometimes invent or embellish letters on a hot-button topic like male corsetry to provoke a response and boost their circulation? The truth is likely a mix of both. Regardless of their origin, the letters reveal a deep cultural anxiety. The core of the argument was always the same. What makes a man a man? For one side, it was control, discipline, refinement, and a perfect outward appearance. For the other, it was nature, strength, simplicity, and a rejection of artifice. The corset became the symbolic battleground for these two competing visions of masculinity. You fold the newspaper and place it on the table. The fierce debate raging in its pages proves one thing for certain: the male corset was not a quiet, universally accepted practice. It was a cultural flashpoint, a secret that was constantly threatening to become a public scandal. It forced men to choose a side, even if only in the privacy of their own minds as they laced themselves up each morning. Was this garment the essential armature of a modern gentleman, or the ridiculous affectation of an unmanly fool? The jury was well and truly out, and it would remain so for decades. The fierce debate over the male corset, fought letter by letter in the nation's periodicals, seemed like a closed contest between two opposing camps of men. On one side, the defenders of discipline and decorum; on the other, the champions of a rugged, natural masculinity. But this battle, for all its passion, was about to be completely upended by an unexpected new army entering the field. While gentlemen argued amongst themselves about whether their stays were manly or effeminate, a powerful movement led by women was gaining steam, arguing that the corset, for anyone, was a cage. This was the dress reform movement, and it would become the male corset's most formidable, if unintentional, enemy. You start to see it in pamphlets left on reading room tables, or you might even hear the passionate voice of a female lecturer at a public hall. These are women, often the same women involved in the fight for abolition and suffrage, who have turned their critical eye to the prison of 19th century female fashion. Their arguments are radical and compelling. They attack the multiple layers of heavy petticoats, the cumbersome crinolines, and above all, the corset, which they brand as an instrument of torture that deforms the ribs, crushes the internal organs, and hobbles a woman's every move. The most famous symbol of their cause was the bloomer costume, a combination of a shorter skirt worn over loose-fitting trousers gathered at the ankle. First appearing in the 1850s, this outfit caused an absolute public scandal. The women who dared to wear it were met with street harassment and vicious ridicule in the press. While the fashion itself ultimately failed, the controversy it generated was a resounding success. It forced the entire nation to talk about women's clothing, health, and freedom. The dress reformers were making the corset a public health crisis, and here we find one of history's truly strange alliances. In one corner, you have the John Bull traditionalist, who despises the male corset because he sees it as an effeminate French perversion of masculinity. In the other corner, you have the progressive female dress reformer, who despises the female corset because she sees it as a patriarchal tool of oppression. These two people could not be more different in their politics or their vision for the future. You can almost picture the awkward silence if they ever realized they were on the same side. Yet, on this one single issue, they became unwitting comrades in arms. They were firing at the exact same target, just from opposite ends of the ideological battlefield. The arguments of the dress reformers, aimed squarely at women, began to have a powerful crossover effect. The vivid diagrams they published, showing how a tightly laced waist displaced the liver and compressed the lungs, did not specify the gender of the organs being damaged. The powerful argument that the corset was an unnatural, unhealthy device started to stick in the public consciousness. This created a serious problem for the man wearing one for health reasons. How could you argue that your spinal support was medically necessary when the most vocal medical reformers were branding the exact same garment as a public menace? The entire practice was being reframed. This is where we see a fascinating
Oh, it
scholarly
suits
debate
you,
about
sir.
the male doctors of the era. Were the many
Quite the
physicians
dashing
who
figure you
loudly
make.
condemned the harm of
Indeed, the
women's
latest
corsetry
fashion.
truly motivated by a concern for female health? Or were they, as some historians suggest, more interested in asserting medical authority over women's bodies and choices, while often conveniently ignoring or downplaying the similar habits of their male patients? As if this two-pronged attack wasn't enough, another cultural force was emerging that challenged the stiff silhouette from a different direction entirely. The aesthetic movement, which blossomed in the later decades of the century and is famously associated with Oscar Wilde, promoted a new ideal of beauty based on art, nature, and individual expression. For men, this meant rejecting the rigid, uniform-like frock coat in favor of softer fabrics, looser cuts, and more artistic accessories, velvet jackets, flowing ties, and long hair. Oscar Wilde's languid, poetic posture was simply incompatible with a steel-bone corset. It was a new kind of dandyism, one that prized comfort and artistic flair over rigid, military-inspired construction. The result of all this was that the cultural tide began to turn decisively against the corset in general. The all-out war on the female corset was creating significant collateral damage for the male version. The garment was successfully being rebranded in the public mind not as a tool of high fashion or discipline, but as a medieval-looking health hazard. For the gentleman still secretly lacing up each morning, the risks were escalating, the justifications were wearing thin, and the chances of being seen not just as a fool, but as a self-harming eccentric, were growing higher with every passionate speech by a dress reformer. With the corset under attack from traditionalists, feminists, and artists, you might expect the practice to wither on the vine, but the 19th century was the dawn of a new and powerful force, one that cared little for social critique, modern capitalism. The corset industry was a business, a lucrative one, and it was not going to give up its male customers without a fight. So it fought back with the most effective weapon in its arsenal: advertising. And you, the respectable man with your secret anxieties about your posture, your paunch, and your place in the world, are the prime target. You're settled in your chair after dinner, reading the morning paper that was delivered hours ago. Your eye drifts past the shipping news and the political commentary, and it lands on an advertisement. There's an engraving of a man. He is handsome, confident, and impeccably dressed. Perhaps he's standing behind a large desk, gesturing with authority, or maybe he's outdoors, holding a riding crop, the very picture of health. He is the man you are supposed to be, and the ad promises to help you get there. The text begins, not by mentioning fashion, but
Oh,
by
it
appealing
suits
to
you,
your
sir.
deepest-seated worries. Are you fatigued?
Quite
It
the
might ask
dashing
in bold
figure you
letters.
make.
Indeed,
Do
the
you suffer
latest
from a
fashion.
weak back or indigestion? The ad speaks the language of therapeutic relief. This is not a corset. This is the Samson brace or the Hercules body belt. The names are deliberately, almost comically, masculine. One step away from calling it the Thunderlord 3000 support girdle. The ad then lays out its promises, a holy trinity of masculine aspiration. First, and most importantly, it promises health. In a direct counterattack to the dress reformers, these ads position the corset as a medical necessity. It will support the spine, hold the organs in their natural position, promote healthy digestion, and even give you a feeling of renewed vigor. They could promise almost anything. This was the golden age of patent medicines and health appliances, an era with virtually no advertising regulation. A manufacturer could claim their device cured lumbago, kidney trouble, and general exhaustion with impunity. Their claims were so broad, they stopped just short of promising it would also help you with your taxes. Second, the ad promises status and success. The confident man in the illustration is not just healthy, he is successful. The subtext is clear in the competitive modern world. A man with a commanding, upright posture is taken more seriously. He projects authority. He gets the promotion. He wins the contract. A sloucher, by contrast, looks weak and ineffectual. The corset is thus framed as a career investment, a tool for professional self-improvement. And third, it promises romantic success. The copy might be more subtle here, but the implication is unmistakable. A man with a trim, athletic figure and a confident, manly bearing is more attractive. He is more virile. The renewed vigor the belt provides is not just for the workplace. The ad is selling you a better version of yourself, one who is successful in all arenas of life. Advertising historians debate how to interpret these ads. Are they a cynical exploitation of men's insecurities about aging, health, and masculinity? Or do they reflect a genuine belief in the era's pervasive self-improvement culture, where external aids were seen as perfectly legitimate tools for becoming a better, healthier, more successful person? The answer, as you look at the ad, feels like a bit of both. To seal the deal, the advertisement might employ a surprisingly modern tactic, a quirky gimmick to overcome your hesitation. Sent on a week's free trial, it might proclaim or offer a money-back guarantee if not entirely satisfied. This was a clever bit of psychology. It lowered the risk of purchase and made the company seem confident in its miraculous claims, all while banking on the fact that few men would go through the potentially embarrassing process of actually returning a used undergarment through the mail. You put down the paper. The ad has done its work. It has created a powerful counter-narrative to all the public scorn and medical warnings. It has transformed a purchase of vanity into a rational, sensible act. You wouldn't be buying a corset, you would be investing in a health appliance, a career tool, a way to reclaim your manly vigor. The advertisement has given you the justification you needed, a respectable permission slip to continue a practice that the rest of the world was beginning to condemn. The mail-order advertisement offers a convenient and anonymous solution, a purchase made from the safety of your own home, arriving in a discreet brown wrapper. But for the man of significant means, for whom a perfect, flawless fit is paramount, there is another, more exclusive path. This path requires trust. It demands a higher level of commitment, and it leads you away from the public marketplace into the hushed, inner sanctum of a master tailor, the keeper of secrets for the city's elite. You find yourself on a street like London's Savile Row, the world's undisputed epicenter of bespoke menswear. You are ushered past the front showroom with its bolts of woolen tweed and into a private fitting room in the back. The world outside vanishes. Heavy velvet curtains block the windows, and the room is dominated by a triptych of massive mirrors. The air is quiet, smelling of chalk, warm irons, and fine cloth. This is a space built for confidentiality. The master tailor enters. He is not a fawning shopkeeper, but a calm, dignified artisan. He may be old or young, but his eyes are sharp and his hands are knowing. This man is a repository of secrets. He has measured the bodies of generals, politicians, and aristocrats. He knows who is gaining weight, who has a dueling scar, and who requires a little extra support to maintain their public image. He knows more secrets than a priest in a confessional, and he is almost certainly better paid. Historians of masculinity debate the nature of this unique relationship. Was the tailor seen merely as a skilled tradesman providing a service, or did his intimate knowledge of his clients' bodies and secrets grant him a unique, almost subversive form of power and influence over them? Looking at this man, you sense it as a complex partnership built on absolute discretion. His livelihood depends on his silence. The fitting begins. You remove your coat and waistcoat, standing before him in your shirt sleeves. He approaches, not with a pre-made garment, but with a simple tape measure. The process is clinical, yet profoundly intimate. The cool, smooth tape slides across your shoulders, your chest, and then your waist. He measures you relaxed. Then he asks you to draw yourself in, and he measures you again. his low
Quite the
voice
dashing figure
murmuring the
you
numbers
make.
to his
Indeed,
assistant,
the latest
who notes
fashion.
them in a large leather-bound ledger. He might press gently on your torso with his fingertips, assessing the firmness of your flesh and how your body's likely to respond to the pressure of the stays. You are revealing more about your physical reality to your tailor than you probably have to your doctor. To ensure a perfect result, he might bring out a quirky and ingenious tool, a fitting corset. This is not a finished garment, but an adjustable sample, a lattice of straps and lacing that can be tightened and loosened. He has you put it on, and he adjusts it, observing precisely where your body needs support, where it resists, and how the pressure can be best distributed to achieve the silhouette you desire. He is, in this moment, both an artist studying his medium and an engineer planning a construction. He wouldn't flinch if you asked him to build a secret pocket for a pet hamster. His job is to make the impossible possible. Once the measurements and observations are complete, the consultation begins. What is the primary purpose of this garment? Is it for all-day wear at the office, requiring a balance of support and comfort? Is it for formal evening attire, demanding a more dramatic, tightly cinched waistline for a few hours? Or is it a robust riding corset for your sporting life? You discuss the materials: of fine, breathable coutil for the body, perhaps a soft chamois, leather lining for comfort, and you decide on the boning, flexible whalebone for ease of movement, or rigid, unyielding steel for maximum control. The fitting is over. You leave the quiet sanctum and step back out into the bustling street, your secret safe in the tailor's ledger. You have not simply bought a product from a catalog. You have commissioned a work of art, a piece of intimate architecture engineered for your body alone. You have entered into a confidential pact with the master craftsman who will not just make your clothes, but will secretly build the very body that wears them. The tailor's ledger, with its cryptic measurements and names, holds the secrets of the city's most powerful men. While his lips are sealed by a code of professional discretion as rigid as the stays he creates, the public has always had its suspicions. So now, let's leave the quiet fitting room and tune our ears to the gossip of the era, to the whispers in smoky club rooms, the hints in society columns, and the loud accusations of satirical prints to speculate on which famous figures were believed to be dedicated followers of this tightly laced fashion. You are sitting in the deep leather armchair of a gentleman's club, a cloud of cigar smoke hanging in the air. At a nearby table, two men are talking in low, confidential voices, occasionally glancing over their shoulders. They are dissecting the character and appearance of a prominent politician. This is where reputations were made and unmade, where whispers could solidify into accepted truths.
Oh, it suits you,
Proving that a
sir.
specific historical figure wore a
Quite the
corset
dashing
is,
figure you
for a
make.
historian,
Indeed, the latest
an
fashion.
incredibly difficult task. It's like trying to prove a friend uses a beautifying filter in all their photos. You feel it in your bones. The visual evidence is suggestive, but concrete proof is almost impossible to find. Biographers and historians face this exact challenge. Lacking definitive proof, like a candid diary entry, laced myself an inch tighter today, feeling rather faint, or a surviving garment with a name tape sewn inside. They must debate the validity of using satirical depictions and society gossip as genuine historical evidence. How much can a cartoon, designed specifically to mock and exaggerate, tell us about a person's actual choice of undergarments? It's a fascinating question with no easy answer. We can start, of course, with our confirmed trendsetter, Prince Albert. His commitment to the V-shaped silhouette was not a rumor. It was a matter of public record. Visible in dozens of official portraits, he was the gold standard, the ideal against which other men were measured. But the whispers went far beyond the British court. Let's turn our attention across the English Channel to the glittering Second French Empire. Its ruler, Emperor Napoleon III, the nephew of the great Napoleon Bonaparte, was perhaps the most widely rumored corset wearer of the mid-19th century. His court was a spectacle of lavishness and high fashion, and the emperor himself was notoriously image-conscious. Official portraits and photographs show a man with a distinctly barrel-chested, narrow-waisted physique, often accentuated by military uniforms groaning with medals. His iconic waxed goatee and upturned mustache were just one part of a carefully constructed, almost theatrical, public image. It was widely suspected that his facial hair wasn't the only part of his appearance that was artificially stiffened. Caricaturists on both sides of the channel had a field day with him. They depicted him as a preening peacock, a dandy king, squeezing his portly figure into a straining corset. One quirky French cartoon shows him being tightly laced by a giant imperial eagle, the very symbol of his empire, a brilliant visual metaphor for a ruler whose authority was propped up by artificial means. For the public, Napoleon III and the male corset were inextricably linked. The military, as we've discussed, was another hotbed of rumored corsetry. You see a portrait of an aging general, a hero of a past war, perhaps the Crimea or even the Napoleonic campaigns. He is 60, maybe 70 years old, yet his posture is as straight and his figure as trim as it was when he was a young officer. How did he achieve this? While his armies might have had a collapsing front, his own waistline would not. The military belt or stay was the perfect, respectable tool for an old soldier to maintain his youthful, disciplined bearing for parades and public appearances. Any public figure known for a flamboyant sense of style was an immediate suspect. The British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, with his flashy waistcoats, elaborate hair, and dandified manner, was a constant subject of speculation. In the rigid world of Victorian politics, any man who appeared to care too much about his appearance was presumed to be hiding something, and a corset was the most likely secret. While the tailor's ledgers have long since turned to dust, the sheer volume of these whispers, rumors, and satirical attacks paints a vivid picture. The Victorian public was fascinated, almost obsessed, with the idea of its powerful leaders being secretly constrained by corsets. It was seen as a key to their character proof of either admirable discipline or laughable vanity. The hunt for the hidden corset was one of the great, unspoken parlor games of the 19th century. The whispers in the clubrooms, the advertisements in the papers, the fierce debates in the letters column, all of this activity, for and against, swirled around a single, dominant, V-shaped ideal of the male form. For decades, it reigned supreme. But even as the practice of corsetry seemed to reach its zenith, embraced by princes, generals, and ambitious clerks alike, the seeds of its destruction were already being sown. A new idea of masculinity was on the rise, one born not in the tailor's fitting room, but on the playing field. You find yourself, in the later decades of the 19th century, on the grassy bank of a river on a summer's afternoon. The scene is one of vigorous, joyous activity. Young men in flannels and straw boaters are rowing with powerful synchronized strokes. On a nearby lawn, a fast-paced game of tennis is underway. And along the path, a strange and wonderful new machine glides past a man on a safety bicycle, its equal-sized wheels and chain drive making it a far more stable and accessible vehicle than the clumsy penny farthings of the past. This is the new cult of athleticism, where once a gentleman's leisure might have consisted of a quiet stroll or a game of cards. Now it was increasingly defined by active, competitive sport, the invention of lawn tennis, the codification of rugby and football in the public schools, and most of all, the mass popularity of the bicycle were changing everything. This new ideal man was not the pale, slender, elegantly constricted dandy. He was robust, tanned, and healthy. His body was not a static sculpture to be admired for its lines, but a dynamic engine to be celebrated for its power. Social historians debate whether this shift towards athleticism was a genuine health movement or simply a new form of class-based display. Was the ability to spend your afternoons playing tennis or cycling through the countryside just a new, more active way for the working upper classes to signal their status and differentiate themselves from the laboring population who worked with their bodies out of necessity, not choice? Whatever its sociological roots, the visual result was undeniable. The ideal male body was changing. And this new ideal had a new poster boy. He was a Prussian-born physical culturist named Eugen Sandow, And in the 1890s, he became an international superstar. Sandow was a strongman and a bodybuilder who toured the world, performing incredible feats of strength and, more importantly, posing to display his physique. He was the absolute antithesis of the corseted gentleman. His body, modeled on the proportions of classical Greek and Roman statues, was a symphony of defined, powerful muscles. He was all broad shoulders, a thick trunk, and powerful limbs. He made a career out of being strong, while the dandy had made a career out of looking like he might be knocked over by a strong gust of wind. Sandow's message was that a man could, through disciplined exercise, build a perfect body naturally. You didn't need to cinch your waist in, you needed to build your chest and back up. This new, athletic ideal demanded new, more practical clothing. It is, you discover, exceptionally difficult to ride a bicycle while wearing a steel-bone corset. The tight trousers and constricting frock coat of the mid-century were useless for sport, and so fashion began to follow form. For country and sporting wear, the looser belted Norfolk jacket became popular, and for everyday city life, the frock coat began to be replaced by the lounge suit, the direct ancestor of the modern business suit. With its sack-like, unstructured jacket, the lounge suit did not require a perfect V-shaped torso beneath it. It hung loosely, comfortably. It was the uniform of a modern man on the move. This was the beginning of the end for the male corset. The change was gradual. Of course, for decades, the two ideals would coexist. Older, more conservative men, and those in very formal professions or the military, still clung to the rigid silhouette and the support of their stays. But for the young, the fashionable, and the forward-thinking, the tide had turned. The wasp waist was starting to look old-fashioned, a fussy relic of a more artificial age. The future belonged not to the constricted dandy, but to the man in motion. The future, belonging to the man in motion, arrives with the turning of the calendar page. You feel the great, heavy door of the 19th century swing shut. And in 1901, when Queen Victoria finally passes away, after a reign that has defined the lives of nearly three generations, it feels as though an entire
Quite
era,
the dashing figure
with
you
its
make.
stiff,
Indeed, the latest
somber,
fashion.
and tightly laced sensibilities, has died with her. A change is ahead, a sense of new possibilities, of fresh air blowing through the dusty rooms of the past. It is a collective, societal sigh of relief as the world steps into the brighter, more relaxed atmosphere of the Edwardian age. The new king, Victoria's son, Edward VII, is the living embodiment of this shift. Where Prince Albert had been a model of prim, domestic virtue and slender discipline, King Edward was a renowned man of the world. He was a bon vivant, a sportsman, a lover of good food, fine cigars, and beautiful women. He was also, unlike Albert, a stout man. The tightly cinched V-shape was not a silhouette he could, or would ever want to, achieve. His style was one of comfortable, languid elegance. He was always impeccably dressed, but his clothes were cut for a man who enjoyed life's pleasures. And just as the nation had once copied Albert, now it copied Edward. His main contribution to men's health, one could joke, was making a comfortable gut fashionable again. Fashion historians debate whether this was a top-down phenomenon, driven by the new king's personal style and physique, or a bottom-up one, fueled by the mass adoption of sports by a younger generation. Did the king kill the corset, or was it already on its deathbed when he ascended the throne? The truth is that these two forces worked in perfect harmony, creating a pincer movement that made the old ideal obsolete. The lounge suit, which had been gaining ground for decades, now completed its victory. It was the undisputed uniform for everyday business and leisure. Its soft, unstructured jacket hung loosely from the shoulders, draping naturally over the body. It was so comfortable compared to the rigid frock coat that men must have felt they were getting away with wearing pajamas in public. To wear a corset underneath a lounge suit would be pointless. The garment wasn't cut to reveal a tiny waist, and the stiffness of the stays would create a strange, lumpy silhouette beneath the soft wool. Fashion had finally set men free. But as men were breathing their collective sigh of relief, it's worth noting a quirky and telling detail from the world of women's fashion. Just as the male corset was dying out, a new and arguably more torturous version was being invented for women, the sans ventre or straight front corset. This new design aggressively flattened the stomach, forcing the torso forward and the hips back, creating the famously unbalanced S-bend silhouette of the Edwardian era. It seems that for every step forward in comfort for men, fashion decreed a new and inventive form of discomfort for women. For you, however, the feeling is one of pure liberation. You
Oh,
put
it
on your new
suits you,
suit,
sir.
the fabric is softer, the cut more
Quite the
generous.
dashing figure you
You
make.
sit down in a
Indeed, the
deep
latest
armchair,
fashion.
and you can actually lean back, your spine curving naturally, unbothered by fighting steel. You attend a dinner party and eat a full meal, your stomach expanding with a forgotten sense of happy satiety. And most profoundly, you stand outside on a cool morning and take a deep, full, diaphragmatic breath that reaches the very bottom of your lungs. The constant, nagging pressure that has been your companion for years is gone. The male corset is not entirely extinct. Of course, you still see it on very elderly gentlemen, on some high-ranking military officers determined to maintain their youthful bearing, or on butlers and valets required to wear highly formal livery. But it is no longer fashionable. It is a relic, a symbol of a bygone age. It looks stiff, fussy, and old-fashioned. The Edwardian era, with its love of the weekend, its embrace of sport and leisure, and its comfortable, confident king, has collectively exhaled. And in that great sigh of relief, the tightly laced gentleman has been pushed firmly into the past. The collective exhale of the Edwardian era seems to have blown the male corset away, relegating it to the past as a curious artifact of a stiffer, more formal time. The man in motion, with his loose lounge suit and athletic build, has won. But does such a powerful garment, one that dictated the shape of the masculine ideal for the better part of a century, ever truly disappear? Or does it, like a ghost, leave behind faint traces of its presence, subtle echoes of its form and function that continue to haunt the modern male wardrobe even now? You just have to know where to look. Let's start at a formal event today. You see a man dressed in a classic black tie tuxedo. Your eye is drawn to the wide, pleated sash of silk worn around his waist. This is the cummerbund, and it is, perhaps, the most direct and visible ghost of the Victorian corset. Its function is to create a smooth, clean line at the waist, covering the messy area where the shirt tucks into the trousers. It visually cinches and tidies the midsection, performing the exact same aesthetic job that the bottom half of a waistcoat or the top of a corset once did. It's a corset that went on a diet, retired, and decided to take up a much less demanding line of work. The cummerbund itself has a fascinating history. It was adopted by British military officers stationed in colonial India, who saw the local men wearing a kamarband, which literally means waistband, as a cooler alternative to the stuffy waistcoats required by their formal mess dress uniform. They brought the fashion back to Britain, where it was eventually incorporated into the new, less formal evening wear known as the dinner jacket, or tuxedo. As a quirky bit
Oh,
of
it
trivia,
suits you, sir.
the pleats of a cummerbund are traditionally worn
Quite
facing
the
up,
dashing figure you
based on the
make.
charmingly
Indeed, the
practical
latest
idea that
fashion.
they could be used to catch crumbs or, more likely, to tuck ticket stubs from the theater or opera. It was the original wearable snack tray. The corset spirit lingers elsewhere. 2. Think of its other functions. The laborer's thick leather belt, the navvy's best friend against injury. You can see its direct descendant cinched around the waist of every powerlifter in a modern gym. The function is identical to support the core and prevent spinal injury during heavy lifting. And what of the medical corset, the spinal support prescribed by your Victorian doctor? It lives on, virtually unchanged in principle, as the modern orthopedic back brace, a medical appliance used to stabilize the spine. The corset simply split into its component parts, its ghost fragmenting to haunt different areas of modern life. But its most complete reincarnation is perhaps the most surprising. You browse a clothing website late at night, you click on the men's section, and you navigate to the underwear department. And there you find it. Not called a corset, of course. The euphemisms are as important now as they were in 1890. It is called shapewear. You see slimming undershirts, core compression tanks, and body-shaping briefs. They are made not of coutil and steel, but of high-tech synthetic fabrics like spandex and nylon. And their advertised purpose is exactly the same: to flatten the stomach, to eliminate love handles, to smooth the torso, and to create a trimmer, more athletic silhouette under a suit or a t-shirt. We haven't escaped the desire to secretly re-engineer our bodies. We've just swapped whalebone for lycra. Design historians and sociologists debate whether the persistence of these waist-managing garments represents a true continuation of the corsetry impulse, or if their function is so different, providing gentle smoothing rather than aggressive skeletal reshaping, that the comparison is superficial. Is modern men's shapewear a direct descendant of the corset, or a completely new phenomenon driven by modern media pressures and body ideals? As you look at the images of men with perfectly smooth torsos, promised by these modern undergarments, it's hard not to see the connection. The technology has changed, the silhouette has evolved, but the fundamental desire to present a more perfect version of oneself to the world, and the willingness to use a secret undergarment to achieve it, remains. The ghost of the Victorian gentleman, with his secret anxieties and his mail-order solutions, is still with us. He's just in your online shopping cart. The ghost of the corset is all around us, a faint echo in our modern clothes and a direct ancestor to our shapewear. But to truly understand the man who wore it, to feel the reality of his world, we must leave the present day behind once more.
Oh, it
We
suits
must
you,
go to that
sir.
quiet, climate-controlled place where the past is
Quite the
preserved.
dashing figure you
We are
make.
going to a
Indeed, the
museum, not
latest
to the
fashion.
brightly lit public galleries, but to the hushed secret world of the collection store, to look at the real thing. You are led by a curator, her footsteps soft on the polished floor, into a large, cool room that smells faintly of old paper and time itself. This is the textile archive of a great institution, like the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Rows of large, gray, acid-free boxes line metal shelves. The curator, pulling on a pair of crisp white gloves that make you feel you're about to witness surgery on a ghost, retrieves one of these boxes. She places it on a large, padded table and gently lifts the lid. She parts layers of rustling archival tissue paper, and there it is, a man's corset from the 1860s. Your first impression is that it seems both smaller and more powerful than you imagined. The fabric, once probably a stark white, has yellowed with age to a soft ivory. It is beautifully made, every stitch precise, but it radiates a sense of industrial strength. It looks less like an undergarment and more like a piece of specialized equipment, something that could survive a direct hit from a cannonball, even if its wearer could not. The curator allows you to lean in closer for a forensic examination. You can see the dense herringbone weave of the coutil fabric, designed for strength. You can see the faint ridges of the whalebone stays through the cloth, each one housed in its own perfectly stitched channel. The metal eyelets at the back still have a dull brassy gleam, but it's the imperfections that tell the real story. This is no pristine, unworn artifact. This corset was lived in. You notice the faint brownish stains under the arms and along the line of the back. This is the indelible mark of a human body, of sweat earned during a busy day or a warm evening. This man was not a static mannequin. You then spot a tiny, exquisitely neat patch near the bottom edge, where a small tear was carefully mended. This garment was not a disposable piece of fast fashion. It was an expensive, valued investment, cared for and repaired to extend its life. The fabric around the lacing holes at the back is slightly frayed, a silent testament to the immense daily strain it was placed under. This is the fascinating challenge that textile historians and museum curators engage in, a practice sometimes called object biography. They ask, can we reconstruct the life of the anonymous owner from the evidence on the garment itself? Do the specific patterns of wear and tear, the location of the stains, the nature of the repairs, tell a story of a sedentary clerk, an active sportsman, or something else entirely. The object holds a silent history, waiting to be read. The curator points to a small,
Oh, it suits you,
faded
sir.
label sewn into the lining. Thompson and
Quite the
Sons.
dashing figure you
It
make.
reads
Indeed, the
London and New
latest
York.
fashion.
The name connects this very personal object to the grand transatlantic story of fashion and commerce we've been tracing. And then you see it, a quirky, poignant detail sewn discreetly into the inside lining, near the top, is a tiny hidden pocket, barely big enough for a folded coin or a small note. What was its purpose? Was it for a key to a private drawer? A secret love note? A reminder to buy more biscuits? We can never know, and that mystery makes it all the more human. You step back from the table. The object before you has been transformed. It is no longer just a corset. The stains, the careful repairs, the hidden pocket, they have imbued it with a life. It is a biography in cloth and bone. In the quiet of this room, you have come closer than ever to the man at the heart of our story. Not the caricature, not the fashion plate, not the subject of debate, but a real anonymous person who lived and breathed however shallowly inside this powerful, personal cage. The corset on the museum table tells the quiet story of a typical wearer, a man seeking support, a fashionable line, a respectable appearance. The stains and repairs speak of a life of moderation, but as with any fashion and any philosophy, there were those who were not content with moderation. There were the zealots, the true believers. We must now leave the respectable mainstream and venture into the shadows, to the extreme, obsessive fringe of this practice, the world of the tight lacer. This is a world that exists beyond fashion. To be a tight lacer was not simply to wear a corset. It was to engage in a long, arduous, and sometimes painful process of waist training. The goal was to gradually, over months and years, tighten the laces to permanently reshape the body. By applying constant pressure, the lower floating ribs could be pushed inwards and upwards, dramatically reducing the circumference of the waist. The ultimate prize was the coveted wasp waist, a torso so unnaturally and dramatically cinched that its circumference might be measured in the high teens. 17 or 18 inches was a figure sometimes claimed. The ideal waist was one that could, it was joked, be mistaken for a napkin ring. This was not about creating a smooth line under a waistcoat. This was body modification, pure and simple. What was the mindset of a person, man or woman, who would pursue such an extreme? Psychological historians and scholars of subcultures debate how to classify this practice. Was it a form of body dysmorphic disorder, as we might understand it today? A private fetishistic obsession with the feeling of intense constriction? Or a unique and dedicated aesthetic pursuit? A form of body art that used the human torso as its canvas. For most of
Quite
it
the
was a
dashing
deeply
figure you
secretive
make.
subculture.
Indeed, the latest fashion.
Enthusiasts, often using pseudonyms, would write letters to the correspondence columns of certain sympathetic magazines, sharing their progress, offering tips on lacing techniques, and encouraging one another. Their dedication was formidable, far stronger than most people's commitment to a new diet or exercise plan. They might wear their corsets 23 hours a day, sleeping in them, only removing them to wash. For them, the corset was not an accessory, it was a part of their body. For a man to be a tight lacer was to engage in a doubly secret activity. He was already part of a hidden minority of male corset wearers, and within that, he belonged to an even more exclusive and extreme sect. The risks of this practice were not just social, they were profoundly medical. The general discomforts we've discussed, shallow breathing, digestive trouble, were magnified into serious, chronic health problems. The permanent rearrangement of the rib cage could lead to severe respiratory impairment. The constant pressure on the internal organs could cause a cascade of issues with the stomach, liver, and intestines. The back and abdominal muscles, no longer needing to support the body, would atrophy and waste away, leaving the wearer completely dependent on the corset for posture. Fainting was a daily risk. Their ribs were probably on more intimate terms with their spleen than was medically advisable. And yet, the practice has never entirely vanished. As a quirky and fascinating testament to its endurance, one can look to figures like the contemporary corset maker and artist Mr. Pearl, known for his own tightly laced figure and for creating bespoke corsets for high-fashion designers. Mr. Pearl is a living link to this seemingly bygone era. He demonstrates that the art and dedication of the extreme tight lacer, while exceedingly rare, have survived into the 21st century. This shadowy subculture, though in no way representative of the average Victorian gentleman who wore a corset, is a crucial part of our story. It represents the ultimate obsessive conclusion of the corset-wearing impulse. It took the era's ideals of discipline, self-control, and the perfectibility of the human form, and pushed them to their most radical and dangerous limits. The tight lacers were the true fanatics, the high priests of the whalebone cage, willingly sacrificing comfort and courting danger in their singular pursuit of an unnatural and breathtaking aesthetic. The obsessive tight lacer, pushing the very limits of the human form, is a fascinating and extreme figure. But what of the man from the museum? The ordinary gentleman we have been following, the one who laced himself into a state of moderate constriction each morning before heading to his office or his club. Now that we have walked in his shoes, felt his discomfort, and understood his world, it is time to step back and ask the question that historians, sociologists, and scholars of gender still grapple with today. Who was he, really? What did his secret practice truly mean? As you look back on this man, you see a figure who can be interpreted in several, often contradictory ways. The first and most straightforward reading is that he was the ultimate conformist, a quintessential fashion victim. In this view, he was simply a man caught in the powerful currents of his time. Society, through its trendsetters like Prince Albert, demanded a certain V-shaped silhouette. His tailor, his peers, and the advertisements he read all reinforced this ideal. And so, like a person today buying a particular brand of sneakers or a specific style of jeans, he adopted the necessary accessory to fit in. His corset was a tool of conformity, a physical manifestation of his desire to succeed within the strict rules of his society. He was literally reshaping his body to fit the narrow mold of the respectable gentleman. This interpretation is compelling in its simplicity, but other historians offer a more complex and subversive reading. They ask us to consider the corset not just as a tool of conformity, but as a potential instrument of quiet, personal rebellion. Think of the dominant social ideology of the 19th century, the doctrine of separate spheres. This theory held that men and women were fundamentally different and belonged in different worlds. Men in the public sphere of work, politics, and war, women in the private and domestic sphere of home and family. Their clothes were a key symbol of this division. So what does it mean when a man, a master of the public sphere, secretly puts on the most iconic garment of the female sphere? From this perspective, the act becomes a fascinating, private blurring of rigid gender lines. While publicly upholding the standards of Victorian masculinity, was he, in the privacy of his dressing room, exploring a different kind of identity? Was it a way to feel elegant and beautiful in a way that society only permitted women to be? This reading, popular in queer theory and gender studies, doesn't necessarily label these men as we would today, but suggests their actions were a form of coded gender transgression. It's certainly the most exciting theory, turning every stuffy-looking dandy into a potential secret agent of gender chaos. We know from the quirky and popular tradition of theatrical cross-dressing women playing dashing principal boys and men, playing comical dames in pantomimes, that the Victorians were not completely blind to the performance of gender, at least in sanctioned, public ways. Then there is a third, far more down-to-earth interpretation, that of the pragmatist. This view sets aside the grand theories of conformity and rebellion and looks at the simple, practical motivations we've explored. Perhaps the man in the corset was not a fashion victim or a quiet rebel at all. Perhaps he was simply a 50-year-old man with a developing knowledge and sore back. Perhaps he was a retired army officer, using a support belt to maintain the dignity of his old posture. Perhaps he was a sportsman who genuinely believed his riding belt helped his performance. or a man who took his doctor's prescription for a spinal brace at face value. Without a time machine, we're left to guess whether his primary motivation was status or sciatica. So, which is it? Was he a sheep, a trailblazer, or just a guy with a backache? The most likely truth is that he could have been all of these things at once, and that is what makes him so compelling. A man might have started wearing a corset for a practical medical reason, then discovered he enjoyed the fashionable shape it gave him, while also in a quiet, unexamined way, taking pleasure in the secret act of wearing a feminine garment. His motivations were likely as layered and complex as the clothing he wore. The corseted Victorian gentleman defies easy labels, and it is this ambiguity, this refusal to fit neatly into any one of our modern boxes, that makes him such an endlessly fascinating figure. Our inability to pin down the Victorian gentleman's exact motives, was it vanity, conformity, health, or a secret rebellion, is perhaps so difficult because we see echoes of his same complex desires in the world all around us today. We may have shed the whalebone and steel, but the fundamental human impulse to shape, control, and perfect the body has not gone away. It has not even lessened. It has simply put on a new, modern costume. Take out your phone and scroll through your social media feed. It won't take long before you see it. An influencer, male or female, posing in a tight, brightly colored band of latex and flexible boning wrapped around their midsection. They call it a waist trainer. They claim it will give you an hourglass figure, improve your posture, and enhance your workouts. It is, for all intents and purposes, a corset. The materials have changed, but the form, the function, and the marketing promises are identical to those that filled the pages of Victorian magazines. And for those not willing to commit to the rigors of waist training, there is the vast market for men's shapewear we glimpsed earlier. The technology is a quirky marvel of modern engineering. Specialized knitting machines create seam-free garments. Marvels of invisibility that lie perfectly flat under the tightest t-shirt. Where the Victorian gentleman relied on a discreet tailor, the modern man relies on discreet technology. The goal is the same: to create the illusion of a perfect form without revealing the scaffolding that holds it up. But the corset's ghost haunts us in more subtle ways.
It suits you,
2.
sir.
The Victorian gentleman signaled his
Quite the
discipline and
dashing figure
status
you make.
through the visible
Indeed, the
constraint of his
latest
body.
fashion.
How does the modern man do it? He does it through the new religion of wellness, a global industry worth trillions of dollars. He may not wear a corset to dinner, but he might track every calorie he eats on an app. He may not be cinched by whalebone, but he might subject himself to a punishing, multi-hour gym routine 5 days a week. The goal is a new version of the V-shape, impossibly broad shoulders, tapering to a lean, muscular waist with a low body fat percentage. Achieving this body today requires the same virtues as it did in the 19th century: immense discipline, time, and, crucially, disposable income for gym memberships, personal trainers, and specialized diets. A sculpted physique is the new ultimate status symbol. The Victorian gentleman would be utterly baffled by a protein shake, but he would intimately understand the ambition that drives someone to drink it. And what of the social pressure, the fear of ridicule from the satirical prince? We have that too, but on a scale that would have sent the Victorians running for their smelling salts. Our print shop window is the infinite, algorithmic scroll of Instagram and TikTok. It is a constant, 24-hour-a-day feed of idealized, often digitally perfected bodies. The pressure to conform is no longer local. It is global and relentless. At least the man in our story only had to worry about the opinions of his neighbors, not the judgment of 10,000 strangers with an internet connection. This has led cultural theorists to ask a very familiar question: is modern wellness culture a genuine movement towards health? Or is it a new, more insidious form of social control? Does it empower us to improve our bodies? Or does it just repackage the same old anxieties about conformity, status, and not being good enough in the trendy language of self-care and optimization? We've just traded the tyranny of the tailor for the tyranny of the algorithm. which always seems to know the precise new insecurity to advertise to us. The materials have changed, the ideals have shifted, but the story remains the same. The pressure to conform, the desire to project an image of success, the belief that a perfect body is the key to a perfect life, and the willingness to endure discomfort and discipline to achieve it. This is our direct inheritance from our corseted ancestors. The ghost of that anxious gentleman isn't just in the museum. He is in our gyms, on our phones, and in the quiet, questioning corners of our own minds, forever whispering that same old question, do I measure up? And so we find ourselves back where we started, caught in the strange, reflective space between the past and the present, seeing our own complex desires mirrored in the lives of those who came before.
Oh, it suits
But our
you,
journey
sir.
with the corseted gentleman is drawing to a
Quite
close.
the dashing
It
figure
is
you
time
make.
now to let the
Indeed, the
modern
latest
world,
fashion.
with its glowing screens and its new anxieties, fade completely away. Let us return, for one last time, to that foggy London street and watch our mysterious figure as he completes his journey, his footsteps receding into the mist of history. You watch him walk away, his tall hat and the sharp shoulders of his frock coat creating a stark silhouette against the gaslight. And as he moves further into the gloom, you no longer see him as just one man. You see him for the multitude he was, his single form containing all the reasons and contradictions we have explored together. For a moment, he is the young soldier on the parade ground, his back held unnaturally straight by his regulation stays, his posture a symbol of the discipline and power of an empire. He is a single perfect cog in a vast, glittering military machine. Then, the image shifts. He is the revolutionary dandy in his club, a man whose quiet, minimalist style is built upon a foundation of extreme, hidden artifice. His tiny waist is not a sign of weakness, but the central pillar of a new and demanding aesthetic, a statement of his authority over the world of fashion. The figure shimmers again, and now you see the ambitious clerk, the man of the rising middle class. He is lacing himself into the shape of his superiors, hoping that by molding his body to the correct ideal, he can mold his future to match. His corset is a tool of aspiration, a quiet prayer for social mobility. The fog swirls, and for a fleeting moment, he wears the regal uniform of Prince Albert, his royal waistline a command to the nation, setting the trend that all of these other men will follow. He is the ideal made flesh and bone and steel. Then you see him as the patient, leaving a doctor's office with a prescription not for a pill, but for a spinal support, genuinely believing it is the modern, scientific solution to his backache and fatigue. And behind him walks the moralist, the man who feels the constant, firm pressure of the stays as a welcome battle, a physical reminder of his spiritual commitment to self-control, his private victory over the lazy, undisciplined urges of the flesh. The fashion victim, the pragmatist, the conformist, the quiet rebel, they are all there, walking away from you, contained within that one receding silhouette. He turns a corner, and the sharp lines of his form begin to soften, bleeding into the gray, damp air. The determined clip-clop of his footsteps on the wet cobblestones grows fainter, more distant, until at last it is gone, swallowed by the murmur of the sleeping city. A final gas light sputters and dims, and the street is empty. He has vanished, dissolving back into the pages of history from which he
It
came,
suits you, sir.
leaving behind only the faintest of echoes.
Quite the dashing
It is the
figure you
echo of a
make.
deeply human
Indeed, the
story,
latest fashion.
a story of desire, of discipline, of social pressure, and of the unending, complicated quest to control the self. A quest that begins with the body, but never, ever ends there. The silhouette is gone, but the ghost of our need to measure up, in whatever way our era demands, remains. And now, the fog in that old London street grows thicker, and the past becomes very, very quiet, its distant sounds fading into a soft and gentle darkness. Let the image of that man, with all of his struggles and his secrets, drift away like smoke, leaving no trace behind. He belongs to his time, and you are here, now, in yours. You can feel the weight of your own blanket, a gentle and comforting pressure that asks nothing of you. You can hear the soft, steady hum of the fan, a sound that is present and real. Let go of the dense newspaper columns, the satirical cartoons, the constraining whalebone and the cool steel. They have no more power here. All that is left is the simple, easy rhythm of your own breathing, a breath that is deep and full and entirely your own. There is nothing to control, nothing to perform. There is only the soft silence, the gentle darkness, and the feeling of rest. Your journey for tonight is over. Just let everything else fall away now. It is time to sleep. Rest now. Let go. Sleep. Sweet dreams.